So now Emmanuel Cleaver, very, very bothered by the possibility, not the likelihood, but Emmanuel Cleaver bothered by the possibility of a report from Reuters that President Trump and the administration is considering revoking temporary protection status for roughly 250,000 Ukrainians who came to the United States after Russia's invasion 3 years ago. The move would lay the groundwork for those individuals to be deported. Now, the White House has denied that report. The White House is saying no decision has been made, but that has not prevented the outrage from coming from people like Emmanuel Cleaver. He shared this story from Reuters, and the Kansas City congressman right here in town had this to say.
You mustard moo.
No, that wasn't what he said. Here's his actual statement on X. I wish he would say that every time. I wish he would sign his tweets or his X posts with just musty moo. That would just be gold, wouldn't it? But anyway, Cleaver wrote on X, Trump's cruelty knows no bounds. He's now planning to revoke legal status for 240,000 Ukrainians who fled Putin's war, just days after his embarrassing Oval Office meeting where he refused to commit to helping Ukraine. Turning our backs on our allies and refugees is disgraceful. You know what's disgraceful? That post from Emmanuel Cleaver. That's disgraceful. The guy is so out of touch with Kansas City right now. Send Emmanuel Cleaver back to his stomping grounds on the east side of Kansas City and ask them, those people who have struggled through record homicide rates the last few years. And I'm not saying this is Cleaver's fault. I'm just talking about how out of touch he is. Record-setting homicide rates the last few years. Not on him. 20% inflation. That is technically on him as a member of Congress who voted to print all this money the last few years. They've gotten poorer. They're getting hit the worst by inflation at the lowest ends of the income bracket. And the fact that a lot of these people, well, guess what? They're the ones who have to end up living with the 10 to 15 to 20 million people, depending on the estimates, that Joe Biden let walk into the country the last 4 years. Now, Ukrainians are actually legitimate refugees, right? But there are millions of people that have come in under these programs that Joe Biden has basically made up. I mean, he hasn't made up the programs, but he's basically rewritten some of the rules to allow a lot of people who came here illegally to claim that they are refugees, to claim that they are part of some, temporary protected status group. That has happened. We know that. We've done a lot of, reporting on it the last few years. And guess where they often end up living? Well, they're not living with Emmanuel Cleaver's friends in Washington, D.C. They're competing for housing with those working class and working poor folks in places like Kansas City. That's what they're doing. What does that do? That drives up the cost of housing in some cases. That means more competition for jobs. That's what's happening. And Emmanuel Cleaver is proving once again that he is woefully out of touch with many of his constituents. I don't know who's got him by the short hairs in D.C., if it's Pelosi, if it's Maxine Waters. I don't know. But this guy is not with the average Kansas Cityan right now. I promise you that.
Trying to use refugees as a euphemism for what we would call border crisis.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on here in some cases.
328. That is the number of ports of entry that are here for the United States. They're open.
Yep. Come on. Do it that way.
They're not closed. That's how you do it.
That's how you do it. There's a way for this to go. Instead, Cleaver's saying Trump's cruelty knows no bounds. He's now planning to revoke legal status for 250,000 Ukrainians. And by the way, that's not even confirmed. It's not. But it doesn't matter. It's just about get Trump. It's just about TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. That's all any of this is about. I just didn't think Cleaver would fall for it. Like, I know that he wins re-election by 15, 20 points, so he can probably say anything and no one cares. I mean, he's going to win re-election for as long as he wants. I get that. I do. But I also thought he would realize at some point that he's not in Los Angeles. He's not in New York City. He's not on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It's still Kansas City. Still got parts of the Northland. right? Like he still has some rural parts in his district, not as rural as maybe it used to be, but he still has rural parts of the district. And even if it's not rural parts, there are working class stiffs in Kansas City who say, this is Emmanuel Cleaver's biggest gripe right now with Trump? This? Is there anything that Emmanuel Cleaver would say Donald Trump has done well? Is there anything he would say he agrees with? My guess is no, but you know what? He's out of touch then if that's the case. He just is. 913-408-7957. Trump was asked about this yesterday. The temporary, the status for Ukrainians and whether or not he is going to revoke that status for Ukrainians. And here's what he had to say.
TPS for the Ukrainians who live here in the U.S.
What about it?
Are you considering revoking the TPS status for the more than 200,000 Ukrainians who live here in the U.S.?
What are you saying? I don't know.
The Ukrainians that are here in the
Yeah,
U.S.,
yeah.
they're under a TPS status.
On GPS?
TPS, temporary status.
Oh, I thought you said GPS.
TPS.
Yeah.
There was some news saying that they were going to be revoked and they were going to be deported from the country. Are you considering that for the
Well, we're
Ukrainians?
not looking to hurt anybody. We're certainly not looking to hurt them. And I'm looking at that, and there were some people that think that's appropriate and some people don't, and I'll be making a decision pretty soon. Okay?
All right, so Trump's saying, hey, I'll be making a decision soon on this. I love the back and forth. GPS? What GPS? No, TPS. GPS. I always say to politicians when they come on the show, don't use your dopey acronyms. It's inside baseball. Nobody knows what they mean. Just spell it out and say it out. If the reporter said temporary protective status, Trump would have understood it. Instead, he goes TPS. TPS, who's on first? That's what's going on there. And I love that Trump didn't know the acronym or didn't understand what the guy was saying. It's just, it's very Trumpian of him. But he did not say he's revoking the status. But that didn't stop Emmanuel Cleaver from sharing a Reuters report and just running with it because, well, get Trump. And after Tuesday night, I promise you guys, it's not working out for you like you think it is. I'm actually trying to do you a favor here, but seemingly none of them want to listen. So keep banging your head against the wall and see how that goes for you. Now, I've got another example. Data, polling that's out there from an outlet that you wouldn't expect to be producing results like this, which tells you and tells me all both of us need to know about where things are at right now when it comes to the spending in D.C. We'll share that with you coming up next on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio. We are streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app on a Friday morning. Weather's starting to turn in this town. Glad you're here on KCMO Talk Radio. In the meantime, you got a week and a half to sign up for an awesome event here in Kansas City that is absolutely free. If you are a small business owner or a business owner of any size, and you have yet to incorporate artificial intelligence into your business because you're just overwhelmed, you don't know where to start. Well, join Centric's live event, AI and Automation for Business. It will be your roadmap to success with AI. It's on Wednesday, March 19th at 8 a.m. at the Centric campus here in Kansas City. All you have to do to register is go to centric.com/AI ready. That's Centric, CENTRIQ.com/AI ready. Centric has been training the technology workforce right here in Kansas City for more than 30 years. So they are the best choice in town to teach you how to implement AI into your company. And there's a good chance your competitors are doing this, so don't get left behind. It's no cost to you. They just want to give you that introduction to AI and helping your business and introducing you to the digital workforce. That's what it's designed to do, to work alongside your employees and make everybody more efficient. Wednesday, March 19th, 8 a.m., Centric Campus in Kansas City. Register now, Centric, CENTRIQ.com/AI ready.
Stream Mundo in the morning on the KCMO Talk Radio app.
I'm telling you guys, you're okay. It's going to be all right. Yes, you and I are going to be just fine. We are on the side of the American people when it comes to cutting government waste, shrinking the size of government. Do not let national media, legacy media, or even local media here in Kansas City try to convince you otherwise. Don't do it, John. I know you're not, but some people are.
And we had a caller, I think it was Linda in Olathe, that had the point that people are equating a layoff of people with a lack of service, which isn't necessarily the equation.
No, not at all.
Right.
It's how do we find more efficiencies and save the taxpayer money? That's what's going on right now in Washington, D.C. But you look at how the town halls for certain Republican members of Congress, we've seen that for Roger Marshall in Kansas, Mark Alford in Missouri, have been received. Protesters are showing up. And it's all intended to create this narrative that isn't real. And the narrative is that, oh my gosh, look at these Republicans getting ambushed at their town halls. People are turning on them quickly. Oh, they don't like Elon. They don't like Doge. They don't like Trump. Oh man, this is turning so fast. And then actual polling gets done. And the polling tells a very different story. CNN had this yesterday where they had polling done on whether or not people think that Elon Musk should be involved with obviously cutting government waste and going through the bloated bureaucracies and trying to find savings on behalf of the American people. And guess what the answer was? You and me are not crazy. We're not. Here it is.
This to me was one of the more shocking figures that I saw. Made me go, wait a minute, hold on one second. Whoa, Americans on Trump and Joe's efforts. Musk and Doge should influence government spending and operations. Look at this, 54%. The majority say that he and they should. How about approve of Trump trying to cut staff at government agencies? Again, you get a majority here, 51%. So yeah, Elon Musk might not be that popular, but these cuts and the idea of spending cuts, at least within the federal government and cutting at government agencies, that actually has majority support. I was truly surprised by this, Kate, but the numbers are the numbers.
No, I'm not surprised. And you're probably not surprised. Now, you're being told you should be surprised. But if you're, listening to this show and you get the pulse of the folks, you're not. So once again, since that guy on CNN is talking a mile a minute, let me just bring it back to you at 6:23 in the morning. You haven't maybe had that coffee yet. 54% of Americans believe that Elon Musk and Doge should influence government spending and operations. And a majority approve of Trump trying to cut staff at government agencies. You would think that this is right around 30% based on how this thing gets covered. It's not true. It's actually very popular. People realize the government has gotten way too big and out of control, and they're done with it. And they want to see it shrink, especially because guess what? Those of us and those of you who work in the private sector, you're the ones paying the bill. And what the government is doing is making these jobs numbers look better the last few years, driving up our national debt, creating a larger deficit than we've ever had, to basically buy themselves some time. But at some point, there had to be pain. It couldn't go on forever. And that's what's happening right now. And thank goodness that's what's happening right now. It desperately needs to happen. It's frankly not a left or right issue. It has to happen. We don't have the money. And I'm sorry for those of you who think you can just tax billionaires forever, but the money's not there with the billionaires to make this happen. It's not. So here also is part of this CNN clip when it comes to wasteful spending.
Yeah, what do they think they're actually cutting? Democrats want to argue that the type of spending that Musk is cutting is mainly necessary programs, but that comes in at just 36%. The wasteful spending actually wins the plurality here at 42%, according to a recent Washington Post Ipsos poll. And I think that is the reason why you see that when it comes to Musk and Doge, you see, in fact, the majority believe he should have some influence because they believe, the plurality believe, that he is cutting wasteful spending, not necessary programs that Democrats are arguing.
Tomato, tomato. I do like Dusk and Moj, though. I think we need to keep that around. But the definition of wasteful is...
Dusk and Moj. I like the sound of that. It's like, bro, slow down a little bit, all right? I mean, you can be high energy on TV or radio, but also just take a step back, think about what you want to say, and let your thoughts reach your lips and then speak. Now, we all do it, but that guy's just going a mile a minute. Slow down, brother.
Sounds like a new band name. Dusk and Moj. Here we are, live at the Starlight Theater.
Dusk and Moj. Opening act. Friday night, 7 o'clock. Don't miss out. Get your tickets, kcmotalkradio.com. It's like people are on board with this. Once again, the type of spending that Elon Musk is mainly cutting among registered voters. Most believe, or a plurality believe, that it's wasteful. Only 36% believe it's necessary programs. So when you have Kansas City Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver standing outside federal buildings going on unhinged, bizarre rants.
You mustard moo.
It's like, I've got that in twice this morning. It's not even 6:30. This is going to be a hell of a day. It's like, no, you are not in touch with where the public is at on this thing. You're just not. Let's go to Riverside. Kirk is there. What's up, Kirk? You're on KCMO.
I think people kind of have to realize and look at it like, okay, look at your garage. You got a garage full of garbage. You've been collecting it for 30 years, 40 years, whatever. And you go, I'm going to clean out my garage. Do you go into your garage and take one thing out of your garage and go, yep, we're good, it's clean? Or do you go out and you clean the whole thing out, take it out in the yard, and start chunking stuff that you don't want and bring the stuff back in that you do want, or maybe you fix it and bring it back in? People have just lost their freaking mind on this.
They have,
Crazy.
Kirk. They have. And as someone who's getting nagged about the amount of crap in our garage right now, I can tell you right now that is a very good analogy. So thank you for that. You're
welcome. You guys
you're
have
really
a great day.
You hit a sore spot there, buddy, but I do appreciate it. We've all been there.
Bullseye.
Yep. And listen, it's not all I say, hey, what about all the kids now? We can't throw that away. What about all your garbage? Don't worry. Going to get around to it. This weekend or next weekend, it's on the to-do list. But Kirk's right. I mean, if I take one thing out of that garage right now, no one notices. You got to take a hammer to the entire thing. You got to break it to then try to fix it. That's where we are at right now. And it didn't happen overnight. There's no doubt that the Biden administration blew out the federal deficit and grew government at a rapid pace. But this has been going on for decades, and no politician has been willing to touch it until now. And guess what? It's got to be done. Coming up next, is there a turn in the culture war? Who might be leading that way? It's someone you wouldn't expect. We'll tell you next.
Hey, it's Dan Bongino. You're listening to Pete Mundo on KCMO Talk Radio, now on FM at 95.7.
I think we got Vince Colonnese filling in for Dan Bongino today, coming up at 11 o'clock, or as some call him,
Dan Bungie.
That never gets old, man. It really doesn't. But Vince will be taking over for Bongino with Bongino's blessing when Dan leaves next Friday to go work at the FBI. So Vince will start Monday the 17th. Know Vince well, and I know that you will love that show as well here on KCMO. Happy Friday. We have made it to the end of the week. We had a blizzard midweek. Now we're going to be pushing 60 degrees, and things are starting to turn next week going into the Big 12 tournament. So I'm fired up for that. I'm also mildly excited about the idea that a leading face of the Democratic Party might be realizing they went too far in the culture war. Now, this might not mean anything, big picture, but when I hear Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, tell Charlie Kirk that, there's something unfair about dudes competing against women in women's sports, I believe that there actually is some hope out there. I'm starting to think that we might just be turning a corner when Gavin Newsom, the governor of the bluest state in the nation, says, that's probably wrong. Here Gavin Newsom was on his podcast talking about this very issue when asked by Charlie Kirk about men competing against women.
Like, you right now should come out and be like, you know what? The young man who's about to win the state championship in the long jump in female sports, right, that shouldn't happen. You as the governor should step out and say no.
No, and I appreciate.
But would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. So that's easy to call out.
It's easy to call out the unfairness. Okay, step in the right direction. I've got more from Newsom coming up. I just wanted to stop it there because that's the key line. He's admitting it's unfair. Now, he doesn't dive into why it's unfair, but obviously why it's unfair is because of the biological nature of men versus women. Men and women are different.
Talk about a bombshell.
I know, that'll be news to some of you, but men and women are biologically different. That's why it's unfair. So Newsom is saying something that no one at the top of his party has been willing to say for years. And they're getting crushed on this issue. People are not in agreement with them on this issue of men and women's sports. And Newsom is the biggest face in the party in years to admit that, yes, it is inherently unfair to young women. It is. But then he tries to do this little song and dance, toe the line, walk the line, whatever you want to say, where he is not willing to go all in. But I will give him credit for still admitting something that no one at the top of the party has been willing to admit for a very long time. Let's continue with Newsom.
Fairness of that. There's also a humility and a grace, that these poor people are more likely to commit suicide, have anxiety and depression. And the way that people talk down to vulnerable communities is an issue that I have a hard time with as well. So both things I can hold in my hand. How can we address this issue with the kind of decency that I think, is inherent in you, but not always expressed?
I'm going to stop Newsom right there for a second. Okay? He's hearing what he wants to hear on this issue. When I hear people talk about it, for the most part, people who agree with me and likely agree with you on the issue, I hear plenty of decency. But I also hear people say, hey, you know what? I got to have respect, and I've got to have grace, and I've got to have humility for our daughters. And I've got 3 of them. I've got to back them up. I've got to have their back. I'm not talking down to anybody. I'm not. But I'm sorry, you can't just sit there and say, well, we have to let this happen because if not, somebody might, God forbid, hurt themselves. Somebody might deal with more anxiety or more depression. And has Gavin Newsom ever thought of the concept that the anxiety, the depression, God forbid, the self-harm, may not be tied to the conversations around this. It may be the driver of why people want to, God forbid, go out there and do things like change their gender when they're 14, 15 years old. You know, they used to do things like go through emo phases. Maybe they grew out their hair, right? They were rebels against the man. John had his long hair days. Mark was an emo kid back in his heyday.
Early 70s, David Bowie, the androgynous thing where he was like, you can't tell. And then they were going for that.
I've only seen the photos, but yes, I will take you at your word.
Well, slightly older generation than I, but
yeah.
That one.
Mark, you had your emo phase, right?
Oh, yeah, the swooped hair and the tight jeans.
Yeah, that was your, rebelling against the man, so to speak. You know, that when alt-rock was like a thing, when it was actually a format and a music genre. It was all part of the picture. But guess what? People got through it. They grew out of it. You can't grow out of this stuff that's being promoted and pushed right now. And the other thing is, it does create a very unfair situation for women. And that's what Gavin Newsom failed to point out and apparently fails to understand. His eyes are like starting to open. They're just like barely opening the hair. They're finally at least seeing some kind of a light. But my man, what you're not understanding, what you are not willing to admit, is that what this really is about is protecting women, because I am not looking at my daughters and saying, sorry, you got to play against the guy just because. Well, because there might be some self-harm there. There might be some depression there. Do we think about the potential depression that young women can go through because of situations like this? Do we think about that or no?
You mentioned his eyes opening. You can see in one hand the unfairness of it. And then he maintained in the other hand, he saw people talking down to the communities. And I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So are you talking down by having your opinion, Pete? Is that the confusion? Perhaps as his eyes open, he'll see that hand is actually empty.
Well, that's so true. That is so true. What this is at its core is really emotional blackmail.
Yeah, there you go.
He's like, it's unfair. He's admitting it's unfair for boys to compete in girls' sports. But they might kill themselves, so we basically have to give them what they want. That's the insinuation there from Gavin Newsom. So girls kind of have to deal with it. And you're not being nice if you sit here and try to defend women and young girls from only being allowed to compete against themselves and each other. And that is still very disingenuous. But I will say, for a party by and large that has not been willing to even get that far on the issue, there are some strides happening. I think Newsom's running for president. I think that's what this is all about.
Yeah, there you go.
He is running in 28. To his credit, he's doing a podcast with Charlie Kirk, which is very smart. I've often said Republicans or conservatives in general are far more willing to talk with Democrats than the other way around. Democrats, the party of tolerance, are much less likely, it seems, in many cases, to want to interact with conservatives or debate with conservatives because, well, they're just racist, homophobic, and all the other isms anyway. And I think in large part, our side will say, hey, I want to get Quentin Lucas on the show. I want to have the Musty Moo Moo Man, Cleaver, on the show. I want to get Sharice Davids on the show. Quentin, to his credit, comes on every week. The other ones are tough to get a hold of. But I will gladly have him on the show. Jason Kander, I'd love to have him on the show. Nick Wright infamously came on this show a year and a half ago. I would do that every week if he would do it. Yeah, it was after a year ago. It was after the Super Bowl shooting. But like, man, I that is good. We've got to have those conversations. But it usually only cuts one way when it comes to which side is willing to have those debates and those intellectual forums to go back and forth on issues.
Gavin needs to be careful on his move into the middle of the road. He might run into Laura Kelly.
Well, he's clearly trying to rebrand himself. But we can't forget he has signed some awful policy, and he has run a state that is losing people left and right. California has been shrinking for the first time in its history under Gavin Newsom. But he's slick, man. I will say this much. He is very slick. He's got the looks. He's kind of coming off like a guy's guy and a dude's dude. And frankly, I think for the most part he is. He has just been dragged to the left by his own political party, and he's been trying to save his own political skin, but he's realizing it's not the way forward if he actually wants to win a national election. So from that standpoint, he's smart, but I still wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. The 6 at 6, top 6 stories in the 6 a.m. hour. We will do it next on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio. So you thinking about that new tub or shower? Weather's finally starting to turn. Spring cleaning's around the corner. Well, if you are, my friends at The Plumbing Pro, locally owned and operated in Kansas City for 40-plus years, almost 50 at this point. I don't want to date Steve and his team, but listen, they're pushing 50 years in Kansas City. They are the alternative to the national personalities promoting tub and shower replacements on TV. And right now with Pete's deal, get $2,000 off and 12 months same as cash with approved credit. Save money and time. They're easy to work with, low stress, and yes, you get the free consultation. Your sales consultant with the Plumbing Pro will stay with you throughout the entire process, and they offer easy-to-care-for tub and shower solutions. Onyx, Swanstone, Kohler, custom tile solutions. If you need a walk-in tub, they're the place to go. $2,000 off, 12 months same as cash with Pete's deal, 816-763-8200, or the website, theplumbingpro.com. That's theplumbingpro.com.
Call Mundo 913-408-7957. Now on 95.7 FM.
Friday morning, 6:50. Great to have you here on what is going to be a very nice Friday after the week we've had on KCMO. It is that time of the week. Let's roll.
It's time for the 6 at 6 on 95.7 KCMO Talk Radio. Number 1.
Well, Kansas City manager Brian Platt has been suspended with pay effective immediately, according to Mayor Lucas's office. Now, this comes one day after a Jackson County jury awarded former city staffer Chris Hernandez $700,000 in a lawsuit alleging Platt instructed staff to lie to reporters. KMBC reports it's unclear whether the lawsuit was a factor in Platt's suspension. I will have more on this that I will share with you coming up after the top of the hour and take you behind the scenes on this in a way that other media in Kansas City will not. I'll tell you what drove this, what's behind this, and what is likely to come for the city manager of Kansas City, Missouri. But Brian Platt, who's been in this role for, about 3 years now, 4 years at this point, his annual salary set to increase this year from $265,000 to $308,000 is now suspended with pay effective immediately after this lawsuit was lost by the city yesterday or 2 days ago now.
Number 2.
Well, let's go to the national news cycle here. SpaceX's latest Starship test ended with another explosion. It sent debris raining down on Turks and Caicos. So it was like a show in Turks and Caicos last night. SpaceX launched another mammoth Starship rocket, but lost contact minutes into the test flight as the spacecraft came tumbling down and broke apart. This latest wreckage and latest explosion was seen streaming from skies over Florida. Now, it's not immediately known whether the spacecraft's self-destruct system had kicked in to blow it up. It was a 403-foot rocket blasted off from Texas. SpaceX caught the first stage booster back at the pad with giant mechanical arms, but engines on the spacecraft on top started shutting down as it streaked eastward for what was supposed to be a controlled entry over the Indian Ocean, halfway around the world. Contact was lost as the spacecraft went into an out-of-control spin. Reached nearly 90 miles in altitude before trouble struck, and that's when, of course, things started to go haywire. Now, down in the Caribbean, what you saw is that planes were getting basically halted in the sky because they did not want any of the debris to obviously hit any of the airplanes. Nothing like that ended up happening, thank goodness. But, of course, what you're seeing now is some people are like, Elon's plane or Elon's spaceship exploded. Ha, ha, ha. Elon's plane exploded. He should focus on SpaceX. Okay, Elon's got a track record that would suggest, as a guy who is arguably the Einstein of the generation, they're going to figure this thing out. This is part of like trial and error, right? It's going to be all right. But obviously it did make for a headline story here over the last 12 hours or so.
Number 3.
Well, we have some news here when it comes to the 3 Chiefs fans who were found dead outside of one of their homes on the back patio back in January of 2024. Of course, we had 2 men charged 2 days ago by the Platte County prosecutor, Eric Zond, who was on the show yesterday. It's up on the podcast if you missed it. Jordan Willis and Ivory Carson. Well, they appeared before a judge and both via video entered a not guilty plea. If convicted, they're facing up to 50 years in prison. So they're both likely to basically end their lives in prison. Court documents say that Jordan Willis purchased the drugs from Ivory Carson with Willis's DNA on a cocaine bag and Carson's DNA on a bag of fentanyl. So that's what these guys are getting hit with. And Eric Zahn did a great job laying out the case yesterday, what they're facing, why he charged them the way he charged them, which includes manslaughter. And that is something I think you're going to see more of. He alluded to this, that more prosecutors are willing to charge people who are dealing fentanyl with manslaughter because of how deadly that drug is. So this could be a very important case, not just for Kansas City, but frankly for prosecutors around the country as they toy with the idea of charging drug dealers of fentanyl with manslaughter. And frankly, I think that needs to start happening sooner rather than later.
Number 4.
Number 4 this morning, Kansas City is going to be taking over KC Pet Project. It has been in charge of animal control in KCMO since December of 2020, but that is no longer going to be the case. The city council voted to transfer control back into the city's hands. Now the work will begin to train 10 animal control officers before the end of the year. KC Pet Project is still going to exist, but they are taking over the animal control part of what KC Pet Project was doing.
There you go. I was going to clarify that point there at the initial reading. They're not taking over KC Pet Control. They're just taking over animal control enforcement again.
Yes.
Yes, which KC Pet Project had been responsible for.
So that was something that a couple of people that we had talked to, I guess was David Stokes on Wednesday, alluded to this from the Show Me Institute, that he actually is okay with the city doing this, even as a rah-rah private sector guy. Let the city handle the animal control side. It's been too much for KC Pet Project to handle. So this is a seemingly good move by the city of Kansas City, Missouri.
Seems to me that they should enforce the laws. The KC Pet Project is sheltering pets and strays. That's a business in and of itself. Clearly.
Yeah, and let them focus on that because, gosh, we need a lot of help on that front, too, in this town.
Number 5.
Number 5 this morning, a Kansas City man sentenced yesterday after pleading guilty to killing 2 Wyandotte County Sheriff's Office deputies. Antoine Fielder is serving life in prison for the shooting deaths. Fielder pleaded guilty in December of 24 to 2 counts of capital murder and 1 count of aggravated robbery. And the plea came nearly 5 years after he initially pleaded not guilty. So good riddance to Antoine Fielder, receiving the maximum sentence this week on all 3 counts.
Number 6.
And number 6, authorities are searching for an armed suspect who reportedly fired shots at a vehicle on I-29. Large police presence swarmed a wooded-off area of I-29 in the Gladstone area yesterday after reports of shots fired took place in that area. According to Missouri Highway Patrol, 1 driver fired shots at another driver southbound I-29 near Vivian Road in Clay County. So that is still ongoing. The picture is up on the Missouri Highway Patrol X account. We will share it on our X account at KCMO Talk Radio, so you can take a look at what that car ultimately looks like. There is your 6 at 6. Coming up, I will give you some more insight into the suspension of Kansas City City Manager Brian Platt, what it means, and what triggered it. All next on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio. Happy Friday, 7:05. Great to have you here on KCMO 95.7 FM. So the big news story in Kansas City today is Brian Platt, Kansas City, Missouri city manager, been here for the last few years, is right now suspended with pay. This was announced yesterday, and it comes one day after the city had to settle a $1 million lawsuit, technically $900,000, with Chris Hernandez. He's a former TV broadcaster in this town. He is was then a worker, a communications guy for the city of Kansas City, Missouri. And he sued a few years back because, well, he said that he was told by Brian Platt to basically lie to the media, fudge some numbers. And he didn't want to do it. He then claims he got a demotion because of that, and that demotion put him in a tough spot because he couldn't advance in that role that he was in. So he ended up suing the city. And yesterday, he got $928,000 in damages. $228,000 was due to his demotion from the communications job he had for 9 years, and the jury awarded him $700,000 because Hernandez felt he had no other choice but to retire early from the city at age 58 because he transferred to another city job with far fewer responsibilities and no chance for advancement. I know a lot of people are going to be like, yeah, whistleblower, Chris Hernandez, what a guy. I kind of assume that politicians in general and city managers fudge numbers to us. Like, you're not going to convince me that in a decade, in a communications job with the city of Kansas City, Missouri, Chris Hernandez told us the truth every single time. I just don't believe that. I think a lot of this is personal. I think a lot of this is someone who had beef with his new boss. And now, because trial lawyers are looking for cases left and right, you can kind of sue whoever you want. I was told by a couple of people who know the inner workings of Kansas City, Missouri very well over the last 24 hours that this city is dealing out and settling lawsuits for mid to high six figures left and right. I mean, people know if they get let go, the water department apparently is a mess. They can basically sue and they can get themselves a couple $100,000, easy peasy. This city is wasting your money on these lawsuits left and right, and something's got to be done about it. It might take state legislation, and I know Jeff City is not really looking out for Kansas City, but they should be looking out for the taxpayer because it's really getting out of control. And while I know it's easy to say, yeah, go whistleblower. Yeah, you stand up to the man. You stand up to the big bad city manager who wants to lie to the people. I mean, I can't help but see through that a little bit here. And I think it would be naive to not take this for what it is, which clearly is petty internal politics. I mean, who said Chris Hernandez had to stay as an employee with the city of Kansas City, Missouri? Right? I mean, it's a free market out there. If he wanted to leave, he could have left and found another job. The notion that you have to stay in your job and that job has to provide you with the career advancement that you want, they don't owe you that. They don't owe me that here at KCMO. If I feel like one day, my career is better off advancing in some other way, I don't want to do it, but if I feel like I have to, I will. That's how it goes in the real world. You make those choices. So I'm not going to, play the violin for Chris Hernandez here and all this. But I understand the city is like, brother, you just cost us $1 million. You got to be a little smarter. And that's the one thing I had heard from some people down at City Hall, that Platt at times might be a little too lackadaisical in some of the things that he says to certain people or in group settings. It might be a little too loose-lipped in some cases. And that obviously in this environment where everyone's looking to pounce, everyone's looking to make a buck and find a settlement, that can obviously be costly to a city, and that's arguably what we're seeing here. And the other part of this also is that there are people on that city council who have wanted Brian Platt out for a long time. The east side of Kansas City has not liked Brian Platt for a long time. I don't really know why. I don't get it. I mean, frankly, I think there's an element to this of, he's a white guy. I'm just going to be blunt about it. There's an element to that I believe is the case as to why certain people don't like Brian Platt. I don't have a problem with him. I mean, he's come on this show whenever I've asked. He's talked about, clearing the roads and fixing the roads and the potholes and just kind of doing the job of a city manager, snow removal, doing the basic stuff that needs to be done. But there are certain people in this town who have had it out for him for a long time. And now this gives certain people the reason to continue to push to get him out of this role, John.
It reminds me when we first started the show and that caller would call and say, he's a progressive from back east.
Yeah.
That's kind of the deal. Didn't he come from Jersey?
Yes,
I
he
think
did.
so.
Yes.
I don't know if that's part of it, too. We get real, what's the word, protective around here anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's really even simpler. I mean, I think it's just certain people wanted somebody else to have that job. And
can't discount that in this city.
No, you can't. And I think that's in large part what this came down to. And now basically the knives are out. And the city council voted yesterday to basically suspend Brian Platt without pay. And now with pay, excuse me. Thank you. Yes. And now what's going to happen, I think, is there'll be a standoff here. Will Brian Platt resign, or will the city basically be forced to fire him? From what I can gather and what I hear, the votes are there to basically blow him out. So it seems like he's done. The question is, how does it end? And how ugly does it get at the end? But my guess and my bet right now is that Kansas City is going to be in the market for a new city manager here before long. And I don't see, based on what I know, how that's fair. If that's the right thing for the city, I don't believe that it is. But I do think that's where all this is going. Now, yesterday I was downtown. I was chaperoning a field trip for a bunch of kindergartners, elementary school kids, at the T-Mobile Center for the Big 12 women's basketball tournament. And it was a great time, but I got to tell you, the Big 12 made a huge mistake moving the women's basketball tournament up a week instead of continuing to play it at Municipal the same week as the men. T-Mobile was empty yesterday. Now, there were like 1,000 kids there because there were a bunch of schools doing field trips to the game, but it was K-State, UCF, and with K-State playing in the game, the place was empty. The top rafters were all curtained off, and there were maybe 1,000 people there outside of the school kids. Meantime, when that thing was at Municipal, what you would have is you would have fan bases come into Kansas City next week. They would watch their men's team. They might then bounce over to Municipal and watch their women's team. And it actually made a lot more sense for them to do it that way. You would get more attendance for the women's game next week than you would at T-Mobile this week. The whole premise was, well, we want the women to have the top facilities like the men. I'm sorry, if you're an athlete, you want to compete in front of more eyeballs. A basketball court is a basketball court. Is it really worth it to have less people watch you so you can then in turn change in a nicer locker room? Like, that's what we're talking about here. The intent was good by the Big 12, and I appreciate what they were going for. But I'm telling you, I want to see the women's game grow. And what I saw yesterday, I mean, yeah, it was cool to have field trips there, but let's be honest, it's not growing at all.
I'll be the geek and think, I'm not sure why you couldn't play them both parallel at T-Mobile.
Well, You'd
have earlier times, and we'd argue over who got the good times, I guess.
Yes, there was some thought of doing that, but I guess the breakdown of schedules just didn't work. That's what I was told, because I asked somebody that a couple of years ago, and it didn't work.
I think.
Mark?
Yeah.
K-State has a really good team this year, so I thought that they would get more crowd, but
no one
I
there.
Guess not.
I mean, it was a bunch of retirees.
But to Pete's
K-State
point,
fans.
had they been parallel, even at two venues, you would have drawn, probably half the men's crowd to the women's game.
Exactly.
Right? Sure.
I mean, you would have had people coming down saying, I'll watch the K-State men here, I'll watch the women there. And Power and Light was dead. Now, I know the weather wasn't great yesterday, but there was nobody there. Not a single person at Power and Light yesterday as I'm walking through it at about 11 o'clock in the morning.
Are we trying too hard to bring extra money to Power and Light?
I don't think
Maybe
so.
With the two. Well, you'll have the big one. The men's will be more popular.
This was, as I understand it, the Big 12's decision. They wanted to give a better opportunity to the women.
It's about the venue.
That's what they wanted. But they've totally missed the mark on how you actually grow the women's game. You grow the women's game by getting casual fans who are there for the men's game, then over to municipal for the women's game. But it's clearly you're not driving people exclusively downtown to the women's game. You're not doing it. I mean, I was walking around Power and Light afterwards and around downtown. I saw like one guy in a Utah sweatshirt, and frankly, he might have been lost. I'm not even sure if he was here for basketball.
Or realize Municipal was built in the 30s, but the basketball tradition of that arena should be played up more.
Yeah.
Just like Allen Fieldhouse.
Yeah, I'm down with that. I mean, whatever it takes.
NITs, NCAA tournaments have been played there?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Didn't they do Final Fours there like way back in the day?
Sure, we've hosted.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So use that. Use the historic nature of the venue to promote it. Don't be like, oh, the locker rooms stink. Put it at T-Mobile. Now, I did have some interesting interactions yesterday that as a girl dad, I've got to share with you. Because taking 5-year-old boys to the bathroom as a girl dad, well, it's a whole new world, man. I'll explain it next on KCMO.
Hey, it's Kevin Keatsman. Stick around. I'm coming up at 10 o'clock right after Pete Mundo on KCMO 95.7 FM.
Oh, man, Bill, that's a killer on a Friday.
Yeah, thanks for the Friday there, huh?
I had seen that on social media that Bill lost his corgi, Holly, the terror dog. And I had the opportunity to meet Holly on multiple occasions when Bill and I have gotten together the last few years at his home on Long Island. And this past summer, Holly was not there. And as I was leaving, I said to Bill, Bill, where's Holly? And he kind of referenced, I could tell he was kind of caught off guard by it. But, Holly's like his mascot, as he alluded to for the last decade. And he said, she's been having some health issues, so she's at the doctor now at the vet, and we're picking her up later. And I said, all right, well, my best to Holly. And he just announced, of course, that she passed away from a brain tumor at 9.5 years old. And everything he said there about pets is absolutely correct. I've got a 13-year-old, soon to be 13. Actually, we don't really know how old Woody is. We found him under our car as a stray in Woodward, Oklahoma back in the fall of 2012. He's 13. Now, he's in great shape. God bless him. I'm going to knock on wood. But, you do start to think about that stuff when you get dogs that start to get long in the tooth.
Cat's 12 years old yesterday.
Oh,
yeah.
Congratulations.
Siamese cat. Maybe.
Well, cat's got another 12 years in him, most likely. Those things live forever. My gosh.
Much to my chagrin.
You know what I saw? Guy Benson turns 40 today.
Is that right?
Yeah.
How about that?
I mean, that's different than an animal. I don't know why I brought that up. But
well, no, you know
that
what?
was
We're doing
kinda
birthdays.
nice.
We're doing birthdays. It's celebratory. That's a good direction to take it there, Mark. Happy birthday to Guy Benson. That's a big one. Between Guy Benson, soon to be Vince Colonnese taking over for Dan Bongino, who's going to fill in today for Dan, and then this show, you've now got the three major day parts on KCMO where the hosts will be 40 or under. For people that assume that this format is, just a bunch of stodgy old people over the hill. That's not the case, man. Hey, quiet back there.
The newsman behind me.
Quiet. So yesterday I'm down at T-Mobile doing this chaperone deal for Claire and the kindergartners watching women's basketball with the Big 12. It was a great time. But it's funny, as a girl dad, you experience these firsts, right? I've got 3 girls, 6 and under. And I'm taking a lot of the boys to the bathroom yesterday, trying to help them out, right? Being the dad, doing my thing. So it was hilarious. I didn't think it would go like this, but you realize when you only have one gender, you really have no idea how to raise the other gender. So I walk into the bathroom with these boys, and they're like 5 or 6 years old. And immediately I look at the urinals, and I'm like, these kids can't even see over the urinals. Like, they're not going to be able to use these things.
Yeah, I got the knee length. What's that?
So then I'm like, all right, guys, go in there. I point to a couple of stalls. And one of them looks at me and he goes, that's a girl's toilet. I'm like, well, I'm not going to debate the semantics of this with a 5-year-old. But I'm like, okay, you guys want to use the urinals? And they're like, yeah.
Woo.
Yeah. So these kids, they're whatever they are, 5 and 6 years old. I'm like looking at them and I'm like, they can't even get over the thing. Well, they don't care. They're just dropping the trousers and they're just, firing away. All right. Just right upstream, boys. And one kid, he starts like touching all of them. I'm like, what are you doing there, champ? Stop. Don't touch the bottom of the urine. Stop it. Like, dude. And then one guy, he finds the kids one and he's going, and then his buddy's looking over his shoulder. And I'm like, what are we doing here, fellas? Just go to the bathroom. One kid's falling over into the urinal because he's like barely tall enough to get over it. And I'm like, man, this whole girl dad thing.
You see why women live longer, right?
It's just funny because I grew up with only boys, but then you get to a point in life where you're seeing all this happen and you're like, I don't remember any of this as a kid. I have no memory of any of this. And you realize that, boy, first off, the two genders are very different.
Talk about a bombshell.
I know that's going to be a shocker to some people. The way that the kids act is very different. The way they act in the bathroom is also very different. It's like one big party in there. Girls don't do that. Man. It's
Wait
like
till we get to the soap.
They're having the time of their lives.
At least it was early in the day, and there weren't a ton of people there. So
No, yeah,
it
there
wasn't
were not.
super dirty.
Yes, there were not a lot of adults. One of the kids, he's first to go. He washes his hands, the whole thing. He's like, "I'm going back to the seats." I'm like, "No, you're not. No, whoa, no, don't go anywhere there, Bucko. You stop right there." It's like the dad in 10 Things I Hate About You. All right, I know every cop in town, Bucko. Don't go anywhere, champ. And we just moved on with our day. But, man, it was, as a girl dad, it was a doozy doing that for the first time because I don't have any nephews or anything like that to take to the bathroom in situations like that.
It's an amusement park in there.
Oh, it definitely was, man. News in a minute. We're back with some big media news we'll get to on KCMO.
It's Mundo in the Morning. Now on FM at 95.7. Set a preset on your radio. KCMO Talk Radio.
Couple of big media news stories I want to touch on two massive names that most of you will be familiar with, one on the sports side, one on the news side. Stephen A. Smith getting a 5-year, $100 million contract from ESPN. Can you believe that? My gosh, that's big-time money.
It's a little shocking, but...
Listen, I agree. It is. It's why you saw and heard Stephen A. talk about, I may run for president. And everybody knew that was nonsense. Now, it worked out well for him. He got on The View. He got on different news shows. He got on News Nation. He got a lot of attention out of it. But it was all nonsense. Not when you got a $100 million contract coming down the pipeline over the next 5 years. So that was announced yesterday. And then it's also being reported here that Scott Jennings of CNN is set to re-up with that network. Now, Scott Jennings has become one of the breakthrough stars on cable news. He is the one conservative voice that you hear in prime time on CNN for the most part. I mean, they sprinkle in a couple other people now and then. But this guy, every single night, goes into the lion's den. And he's on this show with Abby Phillips at night, and his clips seemingly always go viral because he's sitting there with a bunch of Democrats, and he's like talking some sense into them, explaining why Trump is appealing, explaining why they're wrong about X, Y, or Z, and he does it in a very smart, clever, and succinct manner. He's not a bull in a china shop. He's not there beating people over the head, but he's very smart about how he does it. And this has many folks upset. The Daily Beast, which is a left-wing online outlet, writes, CNN's MAGA panelist gets pay raise amid staff cuts and ratings crisis. Well, yes, CNN, like ABC this week, and like you unfortunately saw in some of our local radio stations, had some cuts this week. CNN did it. ABC News did it. Yes, it's happened in local radio, not here in this building, but it did happen. You might have seen some of the news on that. So all that stuff is happening because media outlets in general are going through a massive, massive change in terms of how people are consuming the product, where they're getting the product, and how you're selling the product. All that is happening right now in real time, and it's happening very quickly. So businesses need to adapt to that. But Scott Jennings getting more money is a good thing for CNN because he is right now arguably their biggest star. Now, CNN's ratings are actually up a little bit year over year. They're actually doing better than MSNBC in the advertiser demo, air quotes, of 25 to 54. Now, they're still a mile behind Fox, but, you know, they're better than MSNBC, so that's saying something. They're second of the big three right now. And think about the clips that you may see on social media, if you're on X or Instagram, whatever. He's the driver. Scott Jennings is the guy you see the most of. So those are the people that you need. When people are bringing you eyeballs, guess what? They get rewarded for that. That's true in any entertainment industry. So these people who are like mad that Scott Jennings has a job, well, frankly, people care more about what Scott Jennings is saying on or on CNN than Anderson Cooper, than Jake Tapper, than any of these people. He gets way more attention. And he actually did a brilliant job last night, if you didn't see this. I shared this video on X yesterday at Pete Mundo. Did you see this video that was put together of like some of the most progressive members of Congress? They did like a Mortal Kombat video. You saw that, Mark? I knew you would see it.
Yeah, I even saw some of my lib friends making fun of it.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
They were even making fun of it?
Yeah.
So it's all like the wokest women in Congress, and they made it into like a Mortal Kombat video where they show like their stats, you know, their age, how long they've been in Congress, where they represent, a fun fact, and they're doing the whole like punching thing in the video. It's very goofy. And for a party that is hemorrhaging men, that video is the reason why they continue to hemorrhage men as a party. It's like, we're losing this demographic. What do we do? Let's do this video, said nobody ever. and it went viral. And I shared it at Pete Mundo. You can see it there. It's just, they're just a bunch of dorks. I don't know how else to put it. It's just a dorky video. And anybody who thought that was a good idea, like AOC was in there and a couple of others, you got to be thinking to yourself, what planet are you living on that you think this actually helps you grow the party? It doesn't. Frankly, it does the opposite. So that video goes viral. Everybody's making fun of it. Mark said even his friends on the other side were making fun of it. It's so easy to make fun of. And Scott Jennings went on CNN last night and explained why this video was a bad idea and totally goofy. And it's like the panelists around him are so much in their own bubble, they are shocked by this concept. Here he is.
If you do something creative, you're going to get criticism, right? But I actually applaud them for trying to do something different. And here's the reality. 7 million followers, whether you think it's cringe or you like it, we're on CNN on a Thursday night, and we're talking about it on national TV.
But I guess my question is, to what end? I don't get it. Like, I don't get it. I mean, maybe you will get 7 million eyeballs, but what is the point?
I am not accustomed to helping your party do anything.
Yep.
But let me give you some advice. This was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And if you read the comments today, Lord have mercy. Look, scrambling for new social media and communication strategies is not a replacement for fixing what's actually wrong. Your party has a 21% approval rating right now, congressional Democrats.
Well, let's talk about fixing what's wrong. Donald Trump is doing nothing for the American people.
He has a 50% approval rating.
But he's doing nothing for the American people.
And so
he's not lowering the cost of living. He tells lies.
Fix the policy and leave the gimmicks behind.
Yes, and
that is beautiful from Scott Jennings. Just absolutely gorgeous from Scott Jennings.
Between that and We Shall Overcome, it was kind of a rough day for those guys.
It was. They sing We Shall Overcome after Al Green got censured yesterday by the House of Representatives. We shall overcome. Oh, my gosh. And listen to how the conversation goes with Scott Jennings. This is every night. He goes, you guys need help. This is beyond dumb. You can't be doing this. And then what do they say? Trump! I mean, it just right away. It's like a reflex you don't even realize is happening. Kind of like when the doctor, doing the checkup kind of taps your knee and it just kind of flips out. You can't control it. They can't control themselves. The minute he starts pointing out the absurdity of some of these things, what happens? Trump! That's it. It's what they got. It's what they're hanging their hat on. And it's like, this is not going to go well for you guys. Let us help you. That's what Scott Jennings is doing. And that's what, sometimes I'm trying to help him in my own way here locally in Kansas City. But the good news is Sharice Davids was not in that video yesterday. Now, Emmanuel Cleaver also was not in the video, but that's because Cleaver, it was all women, first off. Could you imagine Cleaver doing his little, Mortal Kombat punching thing? That would have been funny.
I'm kind of
We could
surprised
bring
they
his
didn't
moo-moo.
I'm surprised they didn't ask Sharice. She was an actual fighter at one point.
Well, see, that's a great point. She was actually an MMA fighter. You would think it would make sense to have her on. And that's where you got to give Sharice Davids some credit. Whether it's her coming to this conclusion or it's someone around her coming to this conclusion, being in videos with AOC and Jasmine Crockett and the other most progressive members of Congress is not a good look for her. And she knows that, to her credit.
Yeah, Kansans don't want to see that. She knows
No,
that.
they don't want to see AOC along with Sharice Davids, along with Jasmine Crockett. They don't want to see that. And she knows what to avoid. I mean, she plays that middle of the road thing to a T. It's not oftentimes how she votes, but it works. And she wins elections doing it. 913-408-7957, the studio line and the text line on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. We are always streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Coming up, jobs numbers are out. There are two stories that came out of the jobs numbers that just dropped here in the last couple of minutes. We'll analyze that in real time with you next on 95.7 FM.
If it's happening in KCMO, it's on KCMO 95.7 FM. Here's Pete Mundo.
So the headline story on this jobs report that just dropped here in the last few minutes. February, you saw 151,000 jobs added in the month of February. That is below the estimates of 170,000. That was the consensus forecast from the Dow Jones. But the markets are reacting positively to this. Why is that happening? Well, the first reason it's happening is because the markets have become like a teenage girl. They overreact to every little thing. They are convinced the sky is falling. Tariffs are going to destroy everything. Trump's, cutting all these federal jobs potentially. What's going to happen? Because they realize that they have been living high on the hog, and it's largely been driven by government spending, and it can't last forever. And by the way, it shouldn't last forever. So the markets have been on this roller coaster, very jittery, and it's all largely motivated by fear. If the people who are, the big players in the market stop watching some legacy media outlets, they'll be much better off, and they'll have a little more of a clear head as they make some of these decisions. But also what's going on is, listen, I think a lot of people look at the markets the last few months and they say, this is overbought. It's got nothing to do with Trump or Biden or Harris or anybody. It's just overbought. So they've been taking some profits and, socking them away, loading up on some cash. But you see here that the markets are actually liking this as they get set to open up here in about 40 minutes or so. And I think that's largely because, the report wasn't all that far off from the expectations. And as we've talked about before, these jobs reports, and we talked about them every single month when they would drop under Biden. Mm-hmm. One of the top 3 employers in the Biden jobs reports would be the government. The government is nowhere to be found when it comes to jobs added in the month of February under Donald Trump. In fact, you saw federal jobs decline. And the jobs report still came within striking distance of the expectations of 170,000. So take a look at this. Total non-farm payroll employment rose by 151,000 in February. In February, employment trended up in healthcare, financial activities, transportation, and warehousing. Federal government employment actually declined. Healthcare led the way, 52,000 jobs. Employment in financial activities rose 21,000, well above the prior 12-month average. Transportation and warehousing trending up in a big way, well above the 12-month average. Within the federal government, employment declined by 10,000 in February. So federal government employment was down 10,000. For the last several years, you've seen the federal government increase its payrolls, increase its jobs numbers. And that made these monthly numbers look better than they were because the public sector adding jobs is meaningless without a robust private sector. Because who funds the public sector? The private sector. You can't have a strong public sector without a robust private sector. You just can't do it. It's impossible. The government doesn't actually create anything without private dollars. So these are the trends that we're going to see. And I know some of you are going to say that I'm just simping and it's just, about partisan politics here, but it's really, it's not intended to be that way. That's not what I'm going for here. I'm trying to help this economy straighten itself out with the real backbone of private industry, capitalism, and the American people creating goods and services that other Americans or people around the world want, not government jobs that just make numbers look good and make the markets feel better, but don't actually create anything that people benefit from.
How about being transparent suddenly as partisan politics?
Yeah, that's
exactly what you're doing. It's just transparent.
That's it.
These are the numbers.
And this is something you wouldn't see the last couple of years. You would just get the headline, hey, wow, the jobs report exceeded expectations.
Next month, we'll reduce it a little bit.
And then they would also, of course, reduce the numbers as well. And they would reduce them in the private sector, never the public sector, right? So that's what was going on. And we'd be sitting here talking about this, but the headlines would always win out. And listen, we're just doing our little show here in Kansas City, although it is doing very well, I will add. But we're not having the reach of some of the cable news outlets, obviously, where they're not giving you the nuance of what's actually happening within these reports. And that matters. It matters what's going on inside of these reports. So you've got federal government employment declining in February by 10,000, and that number is only going to increase most likely in the months ahead. And if you're coming within striking distance, while federal employment goes down, that means you're getting a more robust private sector that will pay dividends not just over the short term, but absolutely over the long term. Think back to a year ago at this time, February of 2024. The federal government that month added 71,000 jobs. This month, it reduced by 10,000. That's an 80,000 job swing from last February to this February. That's the difference in a jobs report right there, an 80,000 job swing. I'm looking at this right now from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I'm going through their document. It's like a 39-page document on BLS.gov. And this is the stuff that, they should be sharing more of on cable news instead. Even Fox Business. I'm looking at 6 people in a box. One of them is our buddy Steve Moore, and I love Steve. Maria Bartiromo. You can't possibly have 6 people trying to make comments on a jobs report and get into the nitty-gritty of what's actually making this jobs report a good thing for the American people. I don't even know who a lot of these people are outside of Maria and Steve Moore. I can't name the rest of them. They all look good. They all look like they're financial wizards. But, I can pull up this report just like anybody else can. It's not rocket science, John.
That's a good liberal media ploy. Let's have on some conservatives. Let's have 8 of them on, and then none of them get in seconds. Right?
No one gets actually appointed there, right? That's what it seems like some of this is all about. But my gosh, I'm looking at this as a positive this morning, and it's not because I'm trying to sell you on the partisanship of the moment. There is a massive reset that needs to happen in the jobs market. And this is just step one. And I believe in large part also with the S&P futures up 40 points on this report, the markets are realizing maybe they're getting too emotional over this stuff. Just maybe they've got to take a step back and realize it can be okay. And while cuts need to happen, it will be beneficial over the long haul to the country and, yes, also to the economy. 913-408-7957. We're rolling till 8 o'clock on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. Coming up,
You Mr. Moo Moo Moo.
the Moo Moo Man himself. Man, he's losing his cool left and right. I'll explain next. Oh, he just can't help himself, man. I am amazed. Emmanuel Cleaver has come back to life in this town. Oh, man.
You mustard move.
It is fun to see. 8:05, happy Friday. It's going to be a beautiful day across Kansas City, especially after, a midweek blizzard we all had to deal with. But it's going to be a great week ahead. 70s early next week. Sign me up for that, man. It's going to be fantastic. But what's not fantastic, it's good for us. It's good for our content. But Emmanuel Cleaver, who no one really heard from for the last few years, he was pretty much laying low under Joe Biden. And I don't know if that was by choice or he was just told to lay low. I don't know.
Come on, man.
But either way, you had this guy who wasn't really a force on social media, wasn't on cable news a lot, but now he's back in the saddle. And he's very, very mad at one Donald J. Trump.
I'm getting pissed now.
He's not happy. And he put this up yesterday afternoon on X. This is from Kansas City Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver. Trump, co-president Musk, they're really trying to lean into that co-president Musk thing, aren't they? Man, they're trying hard.
Nothing's sticking to the wall, though.
It's not working. They're trying to basically get Trump mad at Elon by calling him the co-president, like basically hurt Trump's ego, but it's not working. Trump was shouting the guy out the other night in his joint address to Congress. If he was feeling like Elon was a threat, he wouldn't be having him wave to the audience and wave to the world on Tuesday night the way he did. It's telling what people do and don't do. If Trump was feeling the heat from Elon and there was some fracture in that relationship, he would have never mentioned his name. Instead, he praised the guy. But they're going to keep trying to make this co-president Musk thing stick. They're gutting the Social Security Administration. And even its own acting head is raising the alarm. Outsiders with no expertise are making devastating cuts that will lead to mistakes, hurting seniors, people with disabilities, and families who rely on the Social Security Administration every single day. Notice what he even admitted there. They're gutting the Social Security Administration. Not Social Security, not the checks. The bloated bureaucracy that's in charge of overseeing the distribution of those checks. Insisting that now this is going to create a world where your Social Security might not clear. Your check might not come in the mail or get direct deposited or whatever it does. It's all nonsense. It's all fear-mongering. But it's all they've got right now. Here's the problem. The American people aren't siding with them here. CNN, to its credit, had a story on this yesterday where they polled the American people on the work that DOJ is doing. But this clip I have not played all morning for you is a survey, a poll done by CNN on whether or not the government's doing too much or too little. And take a listen to this.
So what is exactly going on here? What is sort of driving these numbers underneath? Government is doing too much or too little. Back in 2020, when Trump lost re-election, 54% said too little. By the time he won re-election in 2024, look at that. Too much won the majority at 55%. It was the inverse. So I think there's this real push from the American public to want spending at the U.S. government to drop. And I think that's part of the reason why they're giving Musk and DOJ that majority, at least at this point, when it comes to his influence over federal government
They're giving
spending.
him running room on this, but that's why I think these numbers show why transparency and what is actually being done.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Transparency is great. But, what you have right now is basically the people who are in charge of these bureaucracies acting like the sky is falling and the world's going to end without them, and people aren't buying it. The media is trying to sell it, but people are not buying it. And also in this CNN poll was the following. Right now, Americans support what Elon Musk and DOJ is doing, and they support Elon Musk's influence on government spending and operations, 54%. That was in this CNN poll that I just played some of here on KCMO Talk Radio. But whether it's local news reporting on these potential VA cuts coming to Kansas City, what that could look like, we've got about 2,000 VA workers here in town. Even that is, I don't think, covered properly. Because what they're trying to do is cut 80,000 jobs, right? There's 480,000 employees at the VA. They want to cut 80,000. That would take the VA back to where it was only 5 years ago. So we talk about the jobs report that came out here in the last half hour and how for the last 4 years, these frothy jobs reports were largely driven by government employment. Well, the VA grew its workforce by 20% the last few years. What workforce was growing by 20% the last 4 years? The VA was. And all Trump is saying and Doge is saying right now is get us back to where it was 5 years ago and find some efficiencies in the system. And let's just get back to where we were not all that long ago. That's the only thing that's on the table right now. But whether it's Emmanuel Cleaver or any of these other people that are screaming bloody murder about it, the polling is not on their side. And they're doubling down on something that the American people, by and large, are willing to give this administration the benefit of the doubt on. And and right now, like that poll just showed, people believe the government is doing too much by a 15% margin, 55 to 41. 55% of people say the government's doing too much. 41% say it's doing too little. It's not even the time of small government. It's the time of the government's too damn big and just shrink it a little bit. That's literally what we're talking about here. And I thought John Kennedy, a congressman or a senator from Louisiana, who's always a hoot, he put it very well yesterday on Fox Business.
Most of the publicity has been on the spending cuts. And look, I'm all for them. I think Elon Musk is a rock star. The tofu crowd is mad. But, when you trim fat, pigs squeal. That's just the way the world works. That's the law of nature.
What was it?
When you trim fat, pigs squeal.
When you trim fat, pigs squeal. I may have to put that, instead of having this Kamala plaque outside the studio, it is time to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day. We tap that plaque every morning, kind of play like a champion at Notre Dame. I may have to get this one up there from John Kennedy.
When you trim fat, pigs squeal.
That's very well done. Tom's in Overland Park. What's up, Tom? You're on KCMO.
Hey, good morning, Pete. Great work as always. Hey, hammering home your point here about normal people, and their apathy towards these cuts is you go back to COVID, middle-class person like myself and my wife who lost our jobs and had to hit the reset button on our career. We know what that pain feels like. And during COVID, all the bureaucrats got sent home to work, kept all their paychecks. Same thing with the politicians. So they're all up and rah about these job cuts in the federal level. And I think the average working person is just seeing the transparency from Doge and saying, we don't care. We went through this all through COVID and we had to scramble for our own lives and put it back together. And I'm not being cruel to the people that lost their jobs, but when it comes down to it is that this is just average day Americans have to go through this every day. And these people are just now feeling it. And I'm sorry, but welcome to the party. We've all been there and it's hard and it's rough, but you got to reinvent yourself. And, for the sake of getting inflation down and making the economy stronger, I think this is fair what they're doing.
You're right. It is. What are they becoming the party of? The party of illegal immigrants and bureaucrats?
The party of lost cause. They're in turmoil right now. I think they need to hit back to their roots and see what made the Democrat Party big was the working class people that they've abandoned them. And they've abandoned them. They're losing them left and right. And they have done nothing over the last 6 weeks to suggest they want them back. It's crazy. It's going to be interesting to see in the next 6 to 12 months with this midterm coming up. It's looking like it's going against the grain of traditionally what happens. But, unless there's a huge course correction, I just see more of the same, sitting on their hands and looking like they're sulking in their loss from November. And it's, well, Tuesday was just, we talked about it a lot, but Tuesday was just absolutely horrible for him. And this comes, thank you, Tom, from Ro Khanna. He's been on the show. He is a Democrat from California. He's buddies with Mark Alford.
but I would call him a moderate Democrat. We had him on the show last summer. I forget what for, but Mark Alford hooked me up with him, and he was on the show. Seemed like a pretty reasonable guy. And he shared this yesterday on X. He said, Jim Barrett, a flight attendant, politely chased me down at Chicago Airport. And he said to me, quote, "Sir, I'm a Democrat, but the way the party behaved was embarrassing on Tuesday night. It made us look heartless. I don't care who is up there. You stand for the boy with cancer. Be more rational and get your act together." That's Ro Khanna, California Democratic congressman, sharing that on his social media yesterday. Matt and Kearney. Hey, Matt, what's going on?
Hey, Pete, how you doing? Love your California. Just want to push back a little bit on the VA situation. For the last 20 years, we've had a war. You've got a plus of veterans going to need care. Axing the VA a little bit would be probably detrimental. I'd like to see a little bit of cuts, but not 84,000. If you go to the VA in Kansas City, the place is packed. You go to satellite areas, they're not too bad. I just recently lost my doctor. But you don't want that turnover employees over and over again, because then you just lose everything. You lose your psychiatry. You lose your counseling. You start telling your story over again, and it's like you're reliving the situation. So we need steady federal employees in the VA workforce. Everywhere else, I'm fine with.
Well, let me ask you this, Matt. I mean, I think you're making an assumption that any cuts to the VA would be to what we would call frontline workers, doctors, nurses, psychiatrists. And you know as well as I do, every bureaucracy has a ton of middle management bloat. And what if that's where those cuts are mostly targeted? Would you be against that?
Well, 84,000 across the nation. I don't think they're all in, Washington, D.C., where a lot of them are, where the cuts need to be made. I think the focus should be D.C. It shouldn't be around the surrounding small counties, around small towns, the expansions of the hospitals that are taking place.
Well, I would generally agree, but we don't know that to be the case, right? I mean, we've got about 2,000 VA workers in Kansas City out of 480,000. That's not a big number. I mean, I don't know what the cuts are going to look like here, if any at all, but it's not a big percentage.
Did they come out with some sort of 2,000? What was the scope of those individuals? Or
no, we haven't seen anything yet, which is why, at the very least, I'm willing to kind of wait and see what they're looking at here.
Yeah, I would agree. I would, I don't want to jump the gun here, but I really, as a veteran myself, I just lost my doctor in Platte City, VA. I spoke to a doctor through a camera while I showed up at the building, and it's odd. So it's not personal, but I'm hesitant on the VA jobs, but everywhere else, I'm fine with that.
I understand. And listen, we got to back our veterans. Our veterans need health care and need help based on what they were promised. But listen, Donald Trump, he has been as pro-veteran a president as we have had in a very long time. I don't believe that he's sitting there with Elon Musk right now saying, how do we get rid of nurses and doctors and psychiatrists?
Right, and having to change doctors affects the whole industry. I just have to go through that, and you're right. You start all over again, but that affects everybody in the whole industry.
You're right. It absolutely does. 913-408-7957. Friday morning. Great to have you here on 95.7 FM KCMO and streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app.
Hey, it's Kevin Keatsman. Stick around. I'm coming up at 10 o'clock right after Pete Mundo on KCMO 95.7 FM.
Speaking of bureaucrats losing their jobs, did you see this? James Dennehy is in charge of the FBI field office in New York, and he got let go. He got blown out. And yesterday at the New York FBI office, this was quite a moment. He was forced out after Donald Trump wanted to remove a bunch of agents. And video surfaced yesterday of him being walked out by his staff as they are crying and cheering him on, and the bagpipes are playing. I don't know who hired the bagpipe guy, but someone hired a bagpipe guy, and this is what it sounded like on MSNBC.
An extraordinary scene outside of the New York FBI office in the last hour. Assistant Director in charge, James Dennehy, who was forced to resign under pressure this week, left the building to cheers from hundreds of his colleagues and the sound of bagpipes. He was forced out after clashing with Donald Trump's Justice Department after the removal of senior FBI leaders and requests for the names of agents who worked on the January 6 cases. He told those gathered that he will be their, quote, best cheerleader on the outside. We'll be watching for that.
Did a head of state die? Or did a guy just get forced out of his job because he wasn't listening to his bosses? It's quite a video. I mean, people are tearing up. The bagpipes are playing. Last time I heard the bagpipes playing like that, I mean, my gosh, it was at a funeral for my wife's grandfather. This is James Dennehy leaving the New York FBI field office to the sound of bagpipes after saying he was forced to resign. Dennehy was forced to resign after previously telling his office to dig in following Trump's election win. It also comes after Attorney General Pam Bondi instructed FBI Director Kash Patel to launch an investigation into claims that the New York field office was hiding thousands of Jeffrey Epstein documents. This guy was in clear defiance of his superiors. He was insubordinate, and frankly, he should have been escorted out of the back door in shame. Not walking out the front door to the bagpipes playing like he's some kind of freaking hero. Like, this stuff is not connecting with the American people. It's just not. No matter how you try to spin it. Like, no one's looking at this and being like, man, oh, that James Denton. No one could even pick the guy out of a lineup 2 weeks ago. It's unbelievable. 913-408-7957. Did you see this, too, as well? This was probably one of my favorite clips from the week. Trump and his staff announcing a big month for women in this country. Oh, man. Mark, it should be in there. I'm sorry I'm not seeing the clip. But if you could, just pull that up on your computer. This is a great clip of Trump from yesterday in the Oval Office announcing that, this is a month that we're going to honor the women of America, declaring March Women's History Month. Here we go.
So 2 very special proclamations, the first of which is a proclamation that proclaims March 2025 as Women's History Month in honor of all the wonderful women in your administration, all the wonderful women in America, and in honor of everything you've done for women and this administration has done for women in just, a month and a half? So
Yeah, we've done a lot. And women have done a lot for us, right? This is an honor. We have a wonderful woman here, Maria Bartiromo.
Thank you so much.
Nice to have you, Maria.
Thank you very much.
Hello,
Mr. President.
Maria.
And thanks for all that you're doing for women.
Thank you. She's
Thank
going
you.
to do an interview of me later. Maybe I shouldn't do this interview. I should be like Biden, not do any interviews.
Biden. There's the old Sharpie. Sharpie's out. The long
That's
signature.
great. Women, we love you.
We love you too, sir.
Thank you.
The other proclamation was declaring March as Irish Heritage Month. As a half Irish American, I will gladly take that. So thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. Oh, my gosh.
Such a nice man.
Let's talk about this jobs report last hour. Mark Falter will break it down, what it means for the markets, and more next.
I don't really think.
Hey, it's Dan Bongino. You're listening to Pete Mundo on KCMO Talk Radio, now on FM at 95.7.
Well, we got a jobs report. We got a lot to get into with Mark Falter, Retirement Income Hour, Saturday, Sunday mornings at 9 here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM, always streaming on the app as well. Does a great work with Mid-American Wealth Advisory Group. Joins us first Friday of the month because there's always a lot happening in this world first Friday of the month with the jobs reports and a lot of other economic news and data coming out. So, Mark, jobs report comes in at about 150,000 jobs. That is below the expectations of about 170, but the markets are not reacting poorly right now. Why is that?
I think, the markets are they've already kind of reacted a little bit in that we had a couple of pretty good sized down days. I think long term it's going to be okay, but we are slowing a little bit and economy's slowing down a little bit. But what's the interesting thing is, most of my clients, of course, I'm in here in the Midwest United States, here in Kansas City. Most of my clients are Trump supporters, and they were coming in last year as though Trump is going to be the answer to cancer. And he even said it the other night on the State of the Union. He says, what were his exact words? He says there's going to be a little disturbance. So that's an understatement, but yes. And I mean, you can't do what he's doing with the tariffs and stuff like that and not have a little bit of a disturbance, and we're slowing down a little bit. I don't think we're going to see a stock market crash, but I think we're going to be tumultuous for a while.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right about that. I look at the jobs report too, and every month under Biden, the government was a top 3 job creator. I say that in air quotes. Yeah. And the federal government actually shed about 10,000 jobs. Last February, the government added 70,000 jobs. So think about that. I mean, yes, the jobs numbers came in below expectations, but it's not being goosed by these government jobs that in many cases, I'm going to paint a broad brush here, but don't create anything of value in the economy by and large. So I think it's a step in the direction of getting the private sector and the public sector back in line to where they each need to be.
Yeah, 100%. That's the point I guess I'm trying to make, is that I think long term it's going to be much better off. I mean, I think Elon's looking at letting go, what is it, 100 or 300,000? It's a ton of people. And it's a lot of people. So, but it's all government stuff, and at the end of the day, I'm going to tell you, I don't think we need, I agree. I don't think we need that many,
No way. I want to share something with you. Charlie Gasparino, Fox Business, he's a friend of the show. You know him well, Mark, or not well, but you know of him, of course, right?
I know him, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
So Charlie shared this morning, and I just want to share this with you and get your reaction. He wrote, "The progressive financier class can't believe that Trump is screwing up their little racket. They could make up for Biden's inflation because, well, the markets, to replace higher gas prices and the cost of everyday goods." He goes on the note here that the markets now are basically not doing as well, and the progressive financier class thinks that this is going to destroy Trump. But the reality is the average guy on Main Street in this country didn't have any money to put into the markets the last few years because the cost of everything kept going up. So there's not going to be this political backlash that maybe some people are predicting because, well, guess what? Wall Street was doing great. As you and I talked about the last few years, the retiree had some great opportunities. The person on the front end, the person at the middle part, raising kids, they were the ones getting hammered here, and they're not worried about any of that right now. Mark, do you agree with that assessment?
I would agree, totally, and I would absolutely agree with that because they're going to get helped in this whole thing. And he ultimately wants to make an omelet. You're going to have to break some eggs to get there. And that's what he reiterated heavily the other night is how broken the machine was that he has now gotten hold of, and we got to get it back on track. And I told my clients, I said, if you want smooth sailing for the next 2 years, you need to vote for Kamala because she won't change anything. And he's coming in and changing a lot, Think about this for a minute. He's going to raise tariffs on China, certainly. Well, what do you have that's made in China? About everything. Your American-made car parts, some of them are made in China. And so it's got to take inflation up, and then the Fed's going to have to offset that. And so rates, I think the Fed's probably going to cut the next meeting they have slightly.
When is that?
Actually, that's a great question. When is the next Fed meeting? It's only a few months away.
Okay. Is it June? Did I see that earlier? I thought I saw it might have been, or they're maybe expecting a potential rate cut in June. Does that sound right?
Yes. Yes. And June,
March 19?
Yeah, March 19th is next Fed meeting. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you think they could be cutting that here soon?
Yeah, it depends on where things go. Yes, because they're going to be dealing with, think about that. They're going to be dealing with inflation again. And look what happened last time they had inflation. But that's, again, for the age group of 30 and 40 years old, I mean, they would like to see some rate cuts because the mortgage interest rates, coming down.
Well, that's what's fascinating right now. I mean, this notion that once you get to a certain point in life, you vote Republican, it's mostly older people. I mean, that's not the case right now. You look at the people that voted for Trump, it's more so to be Gen Xers and millennials than it's ever been. And actually, it's the 60-plus crowd that is leaning further left right now because they're more likely to have less of an impact of inflation the last few years, and they're living off investments or they're getting close to living off investments. So they've been in a pretty good spot. They're not looking to buy homes and raise kids and do all those things that those of us who are getting hit by inflation on the front end, 30, 40-year-olds, are getting hammered with right now.
Right. I agree. Yeah. And, you give some of these younger people some money back in their pocket, and they could put money in the market. And really, if the market goes down slightly, that doesn't hurt them either. It's a great combination for them.
That's true.
I think retirees ought to start looking at doing some reallocation. They've had a really good run. And again, I've been saying that it's about time to reallocate some things out and get more into fixed income.
Interesting. Mark Falter, Retirement Income Hour, Saturday, Sunday mornings at 9. I want to ask you about this piece that was on MarketWatch.com. Listen, it's not going to be kind to the current president, but it's an interesting theory. Headline, is the White House trying to engineer a recession? And the thought is that basically, to your point, they feel like this thing is so broken right now, they may need to break it a little bit more than they have to get the economy back on track. Do you buy into that theory at all?
I read this article more than once, and I don't know. Probably it's because I'm an eternal optimist. I like Trump, and I think part of it is true. I think we're going to head into a slight recession. I do not think he is manipulating it and manufacturing it. I think he doesn't care if we do, and I think he expects it to happen. Again, he said a little disturbance. That would basically, in Donald Trump terms, that's recession, And so he always keeps things upbeat. But point is, I think he pretty much knows, and I don't think he's going to jump out there to stop it because he knows it needs to happen. And you got to remember, at the end of the day, he can't be reelected if we wanted to,
Yeah. The question is, when does it come? Before the midterms, after the midterms? I mean, that's kind of the political calculation. Yeah. Or does it come as a minor recession in a quicker fashion that allows this thing to rebound by the time we get to, let's say, November of 26?
Yeah. I think it could, because then you're talking, 2 years down the road?
Yeah.
I think it definitely could rebound by then. I think it's going to be kind of quick, but I think it's going to be very scary for the people that don't like a lot of volatility in the market. It's not going to be a good time for them over the next year and a half, 2 years.
Interesting. All right. So what do you think? I mean, young people just kind of hang tight and, close your eyes and just keep investing in an S&P fund. But if you are someone who is approaching retirement and have benefited tremendously from these markets the last few years. Time to reallocate?
I think if you are in your 70s and you don't reallocate now, I hate to say this, but you almost deserve what you get, because here's the thing. The market's telling you to reallocate, and you have something you haven't had in 20 years, the ability to go out and make 4% on your money. Man, when you reallocated here 3 years ago, you made 0.00. So, you've had a darn good run. So it's kind of time to take the money off the table, unless it's money you plan on turning over to your grandkids. Then don't worry about it. But those young people need to keep putting money in, because this is perfect for dollar cost averaging,
Yeah, right. I mean, get a money market fund, you're still getting 4% with zero risk.
Right. You couldn't do that 3 years ago.
No. The geopolitics right now, how much is that impacting some of the volatility that's out there?
I think it's a lot what's causing it, because I don't think there's a single country out there. At the end of, give it about 6 more months, there ain't going to be a country out there that likes us very well, except for Israel,
Yeah.
But other than that, because we're tariffing everybody, Yeah. So I think it's causing a lot of it.
But does it feel like, too, I feel like the markets, I made the analogy this morning, it's kind of like a teenage girl. And I've got 3 daughters, so I feel fine saying that. But it's just overreacting to every little headline that's out there, despite the fact that Trump 1.0 ended up being damn good for the economy and overall damn good for the markets, and it wasn't goosed up by government spending in large part.
Yeah, and that's just what the market does. It's the age that we're in of instant info. I mean, you can find out anything you want when you want it, and it didn't used to be that way. I remember the days when people had to buy stocks based on a thing called, I think it was called Value Line. You had to go to the library to get it, hope it wasn't checked out, to research your stocks, and then the info was a week old. There is a lot of truth to ignorance is bliss. You know it?
Yeah.
And sometimes you can know too much, and that's, I think, what causes, but overall, the market's going to go up. And that's what the young person's got to remember. Don't be selling out now,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, Mark Falter, Retirement Income Hour. We'll be listening tomorrow morning at 9, Mid-America Wealth Advisory Group here in town. Thank you for the insight, my friend. Busy day. We appreciate you being here.
Hey, appreciate it, man. Thanks.
All right. Have a great weekend. Mark Falter on KCMO Talk Radio. Buy, sell, hold is coming up next. And then we get to our Feature Friday guest. And if you care about law enforcement and that community here in Kansas City, you're going to like this conversation on KCMO.
You're listening to Mundo in the Morning on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM.
Happy Friday. Sun is out. Temps are going to be pushing 60 in town today. That's what I'm talking about. Man, this is what this time of year is supposed to be about. We love it here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Let's do it on a Friday.
It's time to buy, sell,
Have it at end, 12 and a half, 15.
and hold.
All right there, John Anthony. What is on the rundown, my man?
An interesting week. Buy, sell, or hold the whistleblower lawsuit at City Hall in Kansas City.
See, I'm selling this, and you might think to yourself, well, why would you sell a whistleblower like this guy, Chris Hernandez, who said that he was told by city manager Brian Platt to lie to the media? Well, first off, I expect most politicians and people in higher office are fibbing to some extent. And two, this whole thing just felt to me from the get-go like a personal beef. Hernandez said that he felt he had no other choice but to retire from the city after his demotion by Brian Platt because he had transferred to another city job with far fewer responsibilities and no chance for advancement. Is government work the only thing that you are capable of doing? The guy spent a career in media. In this notion that, well, what else? I'm a government employee. This is all I can do. I can't advance my career. You know what people do in the private sector when they can't advance their career beyond where they are? They move to another job. If they don't like where they're at, they leave it. Now, if you are demoted because you're doing something or you're asked to do something unethical, which is obviously what the insinuation is here, and you don't want to do it, okay, I mean, that's certainly part of the conversation, but listen, this thing stinks to high heaven. Brian Platt has now been put on suspension with pay. Mm-hmm. And from what I'm hearing from people inside the city council, he's probably done. Frankly, he is done. There are the votes to fire him. The question is, will he resign on his own, or will he basically dig in and make them fire him? And then you potentially have another lawsuit on your hands after Chris Hernandez just got $1 million in a settlement from the city of Kansas City, Missouri.
Next date on the calendar for this is March 20th, when the full city council will take up the issue.
And let me add one more thing, too. I heard this from a source yesterday. I'm glad you brought that up, John. One more thing on this story. Apparently, the legal fees from the city are over $500,000 on this case. I mean, you're talking about a $1.5 million mistake now. And that may be a big reason why he finds himself in this spot.
That's a lot of e-tax.
You ain't kidding, man.
Buy, sell, or hold the February jobs report that just came out.
Buy, and buy. This, I've given you a lot of tidbits. Now, the jobs report came in below expectations, 150,000. The expectations were for 170,000. But the federal government shed 10,000 jobs in February. Last February, the government added 70,000 jobs. Think about that. The Biden administration was goosing the jobs market for 4 years by adding to the debt and growing government. It was not sustainable. It's got to be fixed. It's got to be broken. And sure, we didn't meet the estimates from the Dow Jones, but it was pretty darn close. And it was close with an 80,000 swing in government jobs from last February to this February. And this may be the best tidbit. I just shared it on X at Pete Mundo. For the first time in 15 months, annual job growth among native-born Americans exceeded that of foreign-born workers. There is still a long ways to go. But for the first time in over a year, the job growth for native-born Americans exceeded that of foreign-born workers. That right there is America first. What's next, John?
Buy, sell, or hold, you chaperoning another field trip.
I'll buy it. Listen, I thought for a first-timer, I thought I did a pretty darn good job yesterday with Claire at T-Mobile Center for the Big 12 Women's Tournament. with a bunch of kindergartners. I thought I knocked it out of the park. I'll give myself an A+.
As a longtime father, I recognize the trait in you to volunteer for the basketball tournament. I thought very smart, very astute.
Listen, that was going to be, if I got it's like anything else in life. If you're going to do something for the first time, you better make sure it's something that you kind of like as well.
Yeah.
All right? I'm not going to do the basket weaving field trip. It's not going to be my thing.
Right.
But I will go down to T-Mobile. I will watch a little hoops. It was K-State UCF. K-State won the game. And I thought I did a pretty good job as the chaperone.
I'd say draw the line at the Deanna Rose Farmstead. That could go either way if you get asked on that. But see, you've already volunteered. You're off the list.
I know. You're right. I bought myself a little time. You're right on that.
Quality.
But I will say, I'm still thrown off as a girl dad. Bringing the boys to the bathroom yesterday, that was a doozy in and of itself. Like I've obviously I don't have any nephews, so I've never brought little boys to the bathroom. I know it's gonna, it comes out a certain way.
You
but
could have
you get the
used a
point.
border collie, right? Where they try to circle around and keep him hemmed in.
I'm like, all right, fellas, let's go. So I point to the stall because I didn't think these kids were big enough to pee in the urinals, and they look at me and they're like, "Those are girls' toilets." I'm like, all right, fellas, let it rip. So these kids are just dropping trow and they're just firing away. And I'm like, all right, well, this is a
Don't cross
mess.
streams.
Yeah.
It's like Ghostbusters.
Well,
Look out there.
one kid's going in the little urinal. His buddy's like looking over his shoulder. They're like, we can go together. I'm like, no, please. Just wait for him to finish and then you can
time.
go. Stop. Just calm down, boys. Calm down. One kid's like touching every urinal right at the bottom of it. I'm like, stop. What are you doing? Buddy, you're killing me here. Stop. Wash those hands. So the whole boys thing was unique for me, even as a, oldest of three brothers. That was a whole new world for me yesterday as a girl dad. And I'll still give myself
that
an A+.
inquisitive nature. Hey, how does this work? Well, watch when I wave my hand over the water.
Buy, sell, hold in the books. We got our Feature Friday guest. If you like law enforcement, you'll love this next. Well, it's that time of the week, Feature Friday segment on KCMO, one of my favorite conversations to have all week long, where we really just bring somebody in who is deeply ingrained in the Kansas City community, whatever that is. It can be news, it could be sports, it can be charitable organizations. And this morning, we are happy to welcome on and say hello to an organization that I admit I did not have a lot of familiarity with, but I'm glad that we're getting more familiar with them. Answering the Call is the organization here in Kansas City. Their president is Ronnie DeMitt. He is joining us on KCMO 95.7 FM. Ronnie, great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Pete.
So first off, take me through the background of Answering the Call, how you guys were founded 10 years ago now, and what that story is.
Yeah, 10 years ago, 2015, I was a detective in the investigations division of the Lee Summit Police Department. April 16th, that morning, one of our detectives got sick. He was taken to the hospital at St. Luke's, and then he was rushed to St. Luke's on the Plaza via an ambulance. And that really started a 4-month journey to save Josh's life. Josh was diagnosed with necrotizing fasciitis, which is a flesh-eating bacteria. I was reassigned to his wife, his young wife, and 3 young kids to kind of assist them and meet their needs. Josh was placed in a medically induced coma. He was enduring surgeries every day to get ahead of this virus. And I watched a financial dissolve in the family almost immediately. When you take a first responder off the job for an extended period of time, their family kind of starts to suffer financially. Waited for resources to reach out, people to get involved, other organizations to step in and assist, just because Josh was a first responder and served our community for 10 years, and quickly realized there was nothing. There was nothing in place. So that year, we decided to go ahead and start an organization to do just that, and we started Answering the Call in June of 2015, and that's exactly what we do. We get involved with our Kansas City metro area, Kansas and Missouri first responders after they survive a severe catastrophic injury or diagnosed with rare and aggressive illness.
So you start this because you're seeing this firsthand, and as you are building Answering the Call, you're realizing the need for this, especially around Kansas City, these first responders who are dealing with these health crises, and then suddenly they've got nowhere to turn, and their spouses are taking financial hits, the family, the kids are getting hurt. So how do you then build this thing up to where it is today?
Well, build it up because the community loves and supports our first responders. I mean, I just put God and community, honestly. You know what's so cool about that is that's the oath that our first responders take is to serve God in our community. And that's exactly who's stepping right back in and serving them in their time of need is God in this community, which I just think is so cool. So that's what, honestly, that's the reason why we're successful. This community comes out, they support our mission. They come out to our events and they make them overwhelmingly successful. And that's the only reason we're keeping our head above water and we're able to step in and do exactly the same thing for them.
Answering the Call is where you find them, atc911.org.
Yes, sir.
Correct?
That's correct.
So what is a story that over these 10 years, I'm sure there's a bunch that you can share, but one that really stands out to you as maybe one of your most powerful?
One of the most powerful, and I'll tell 2, because one's an injury and one's an illness. I'll tell Tyler Smith is an Independence firefighter. Him and his wife, Kayla, have 2 beautiful young daughters. Tyler, I think it's been about 2.5 years ago now, was diagnosed with a rare, very aggressive cancer.
How old?
Tyler was probably 28 maybe at the time.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Yeah, young. 2 young babies at home. Beautiful young ladies, Sadie and Brooklyn. The uniqueness of this family is that that Brooklyn is special needs. She's nonverbal wheelchair bound. So Tyler takes upon himself a lot of the brunt of lugging the wheelchair in and out of the van and carrying her up and down the 2 flights of stairs to her bedroom. Now he's not able to do that. So now all this is thrust upon Kayla, his sweet little wife. So we get involved immediately. We were involved within weeks of the diagnosis, started to learn more about the family. I just fell in love with both of them and their girls. About 18 months later, Tyler was cancer-free. We had donated several $1,000s, kept their head above water financially, and then unfortunately he gets re-diagnosed. And now with that happening and his recovery, Brooklyn had a huge spinal surgery coming up about 6 months away. So he himself was building a elevator in his house. He was getting everything set up for the elevator to be input. They were going to get a secondary loan. So we started to fundraise behind their back, essentially. And he beat the secondary diagnosis, and which was just amazing. And God came through and shined through there. But at the same time, this community surrounded them once again, and we were able to secretively kind of behind their back meet with the elevator company. We got the elevator installed and put in their home. And it was just incredible. But those are the things, those are the stories that
What did that cost, out of
It was
curiosity?
$29,000
to get that elevator
the
in the
elevator
house.
company, ECA Electric, which has just been a great supporter of ours, stepped in immediately, got a hold of the elevator company, did all the electrician work for free. The elevator company significantly discounted it for us. The community surrounded this amazing family. Their story is on our website and our Facebook page. They sit down and tell their story. That's one thing that we're a no strings attached nonprofit. I ask nothing of these men and women. Sometimes I don't even meet them. They just need our financial assistance immediately. But sometimes they'll reach out and ask, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "Sit down and tell your story. It's powerful."
Yeah.
It's very powerful. And the other one I think of is just KCPD alone in 2023. People don't realize this. Kansas City Police Department had 4 officers shot in the month of February alone in 2023.
Gosh, that's right.
Within a 2-week period. AJ was shot in the front steps of KCPD headquarters on Super Bowl Sunday, and then 2 weeks later, 3 of his TAC officers were shot in a search warrant that they were executing on a fentanyl house. That's pretty significant. And you have 4 guys, 4 families significantly impacted. And we assisted with every single one of them, got involved within hours. I was at the hospital with every single one of them. And I think one of the most powerful moments for me is when one of the spouses, they sit down and tell their story as well. It's on our website. But she told me, she goes, "You knew what I needed before I did." And I said, "Well, I've done this for 10 years, unfortunately." So I do, but this is on behalf of the community.
Yeah.
That's what's so powerful about it. It's on behalf of the community.
That's amazing. Ronnie DeMitch joining us, president of Answering the Call here in Kansas City, atc911.org. I think about this organization, and one of the organizations nationally that came to mind is Tunnel to Towers, which a lot of people, are going to be familiar with. You see them on Fox News all the time as well. But they're different because what they'll do is they'll build homes or do things like that for first responder families in need. So it's different from your model, but it is somewhat similar in terms of the people they're helping, right?
Yeah, they've helped the same folks we've helped.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not a line of duty death nonprofit. There's plenty of financial resources, and there should be, for our men and women that lose their life in service. There's a lot of financial resources for their family. The one thing that we step in and do with now, I hate to say even the word, but the widows of Kansas City that we've lost our men and women over the last couple of years, is we get involved and become a resource. The W Law firm right down the street from where we're at here steps in and does family trusts for the families, which is incredible at no cost. But what Tunnels for Tower does is they step in and pay off their mortgage. So we're feeding both of these families just in different ways.
So you're feeding kind of the immediacy need, and it doesn't necessarily tie to somebody who, God forbid, may be a widow. It could be somebody who's in recovery of an illness that comes from on the job, or many times it's not even illnesses that came from the job or injuries that came from the job, right?
Absolutely.
It's anything.
We're duty, non-duty related. Yeah, we need them back on, to take a quote from a movie, we need them back on that wall. We need them back out in that street, in that car, and we need them back in their fire rig. That's where we need them. That's where they want to be. Mm-hmm. So what I've learned and what I believe is truly happening is when you remove that financial stress immediately, it allows them to focus on recovery.
Yeah.
It allows them to focus on recovery. They don't have to worry about their finances. We're going to pay your mortgage for the next 5 months, and then your spouse is going to reach out to me when she or he and your family need anything, because we just turn into that community resource.
That's amazing. Ronnie DeMitt answering the call here in Kansas City. atc911.org is joining us for our Feature Friday segment. We're going to take a quick break and come back with Ronnie, what's coming up next for them and how people can help, and a lot of other great things they are doing here in Kansas City next on KCMO.
Dave Ramsey here, and you're listening to Pete Mundo on KCMO Talk Radio, now airing on FM at 95.7.
Ronnie DeMitt, president of Answering the Call here in Kansas City on KCMO Talk Radio, an amazing organization helping to support first responders and their families during times of need, such as following severe illness or injury. Let's talk about both sides of our state line here, Ronnie, because, listen, these are individuals, men and women, who risk their lives every single day. And that's what they do. They're happy to do it. But most people would say, considering the risk they take on, they are oftentimes underpaid, right? That's
Absolutely.
a fair assessment.
They don't get into it for the pay.
They're not into it for the pay.
No, sir.
I mean, they have a passion for it. They love it. Kind of like why we're in radio. The difference is they're risking their lives every day to do it. So when they deal with these issues, illness, injury, there's nothing from the states or the cities that you're aware of that help them in these situations, right? Beyond their paycheck that they're already getting.
Yeah, there's nothing built in to step in and say we have a police officer shot in the head and he's laying in a hospital bed. I think the biggest misconception that I've learned over my 10 years of doing this and doing different speaking engagements around the metro is that the general public just believe that there's something built into the city, the state, resourcefully, that steps in and just gets involved with the family to assist them financially while the first responder is recovering. And unfortunately, there is nothing. There is zero resources for them. And that's what I learned 10 years ago, and that's the whole purpose of our foundation.
You know, and I didn't think about this, but you alluded to it last segment, which is, okay, they're still getting their pay. That's great. But you don't think about the lost income from the spouse or the off-duty income.
Correct.
That a lot of them rely on in these jobs, right?
I mean, you hear about, if you know a police officer, then you know that they work constantly above and beyond a 40-hour week because
they
they're
all do,
constantly working off-duty and overtime jobs. Same with fire. They have secondary jobs that when you remove them from that secondary income to them, which is off-duty overtime or a secondary position that they have somewhere, man, they will be crushed financially immediately. $1,500 to $1,700 a month was the last figure that was given to me by a Kansas City spouse when her husband was shot in 2023. Is what they were
was
losing.
that number again?
$1,500 to $1,700 a month, and that officer was off for 8 months.
Wow.
We stepped in to help that family 3 different times in that 8-month period. And now he's back on the road, and he's promoted, and he's a road sergeant, and he's right where we need him to be. But we were able to keep them and their 3 young daughters head above water financially for 8 months.
Now, you mentioned the generosity of this community being the reason for your success 10 years later, but was there a moment that this organization you felt went from being like, all right, we got a little something going here, we got an idea, but this thing really started to pop, it really started to grow, you got to help a lot of people. Was there a moment or a person or an organization that really helped launch that for you?
You know, I started it in 2015. I was working narcotics at the time, so busy, 2 kids at home. Young babies at home, wife, and trying to run a nonprofit that I had no idea what I was doing, to be really honest with you. But when Tom Wagstaff was shot, and I believe it was 2017 in Independence, he was shot in the head during a home invasion. And I knew Tom from just our agencies worked side by side with one another. He was on the SWAT team. I was on the SWAT team at the time. And we got involved there immediately. And that took, when you have an officer who is shot in the head, it gains national recognition. And this community surrounded Tom and his wife, who was a teacher in Raytown at the time. And it was significant. And that's what really, I hate to say, but it took a tragic event like that to kind of put us on the map. And the work we did there with Tom and his wife, and they're doing great now. And believe it or not, Tom defied all odds, and he's alive. He lost his profession over his severe injury. But this community surrounded that family and raised several $100,000 for him.
How's he doing?
He's doing great. He's living in Texas. He moved down close to a gym that he was traveling to 2 to 3 times a week that helped with the severe trauma that he took to his brain. And him and his wife just said, you know what, we're going to build a house right down the street from it. So they're living down there. I get random texts from him all the time. He's doing phenomenal. He's doing phenomenal. He's alive.
Where is he down there? Do you know?
I actually don't know where he's at down south, but they're doing great. We love Tom, and we invite him up for events when he can come up and stay in touch with him. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. He defied the odds. I mean, those guys were going in and saying goodbye to him. They were giving him his last rites. And then we came in the next morning and we prayed over him. And we came in the next morning to the hospital, and the doctor came in and told his wife, "I don't know how to tell you this, but we're witnessing a miracle." And he survived. He survived. He's a father still, and he's hugging his wife and kissing his boys, and just absolutely incredible.
That's
brain.
amazing.
I mean, he's still got bullet fragments in his brain from the 223.
Is that right?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Does he have all his? Can he function fully?
Yeah, he functions. He's not walking quite yet. He's getting there. But if I know anything about Tom Wagstaff, he'll get there.
Yeah,
he'll get there. He's defied the odds so far.
So he's in a wheelchair.
He's in a wheelchair. He's going to a gym constantly, regularly. He's doing normal duties for the most part down there where he's at, mowing the grass and stuff, and jumping in his zero turn. But he's doing great. I mean, you think about that. You take a 223 to the right frontal lobe of your brain, and you just don't think there's going to be much left. But he's defied the odds.
Wow.
Ronnie
DeMitt
stepped in.
Absolutely. Answering the call here in Kansas City, atc911.org. So you guys are celebrating 10 years this year. What does that look like for you?
Well, it's impactful. It's incredible that, I tell people this all the time. I don't think there's another place in the country that our organization, from the grassroots up, would have been successful anywhere else in the country other than Kansas City. And I think that's just, that's because they love their first responders so much. Men and women are born and raised here, and they stay here. And then they turn around and they serve here. They go overseas and they fight for our country, and they come home and they serve our community right here in their own backyard. So there's just not another place in the country that I think our mission would have been as successful as it is. But yeah, so 10 years is incredible. We're going to have our first ever ATC. We're calling it the Resiliency Gala. And that's because our first responders are so resilient. And we're going to tell over the 300 plus recipients we've had over the 10 years and 1.3 million that we've donated back. We're going to tell 5 stories that night at the gala, and we're going to highlight them and the struggles they went through and the resiliency they showed to defeat the odds, defeat the severity of the injury or the illness that they survived.
That's amazing. Now, there's 2 obviously elements of this I want to wrap up with. People who need your help, families who need your help, and then, of course, how people can help you. How would you answer both of those?
People that need our help?
Yeah.
Those are just the first responders out there, and they may think that they don't need our help. They're very proud people. But if they've suffered a severe catastrophic injury, duty or non-duty related, or are diagnosed with a rare and aggressive illness, they need to reach out to us. Let us decide if it's something we can step in and assist with. Secondary, if you're out there in the community and you just want to help, you can go to our website, atc911.org. Like you mentioned earlier, our big campaign is $9.11 a month recurring donation from the community. That is gaining speed and momentum right now, and that is huge for us. Those reoccurring donations of a minimum of $9.11 a month.
Because it's just there every month, so it kind of helps you figure out.
It's a cup
budget.
of coffee a week.
Yeah,
that you're just going to give once a month. It's like $112 a year, broken up. You can donate more if you'd like.
Yeah.
But we're asking for that minimum $9.11.
That's a great goal. $9.11 a month. atc911.org. Ronnie DeMitt on KCMO Talk Radio. Man, I'm so glad we got connected. Our buddy Mike Kuckelman got us connected on this, and happy to tell your story. And glad you're here, Ronnie. Thanks so much for being here.
It's been an honor. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Ronnie DeMitt, president of Answering the Call here in Kansas City, celebrating 10 years later this year. atc911.org is how you get a hold of them. That's atc911.org. Coming up, Kevin Keatsman Uncanceled at 10 o'clock on KCMO. And we got our caller of the day. We will share with you on a Friday next on 95.7 FM and streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app.
From the nation's heartland, it's Mundo in the Morning on 95.7 FM KCMO Talk Radio.
Thank you to Ronnie DeMitt, doing great work with answering the call. Really appreciate them coming in and sharing their story with us on KCMO. If you missed it, as always, it'll be up on the podcast. Just find it on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Grateful to him for coming in and sharing that with Kansas City. Outstanding work and a great organization. I'm glad I got to know him. And hopefully you are as well, and consider helping them however you can on a Friday. Very nice texts rolling in as well. That was outstanding here, Pete. Thanks for the positivity to kick off the weekend. Happy to do it. Happy to do it. Anything to show support for the men and women in law enforcement, first responders, firefighters here around Kansas City, we are obviously more than willing and happy to do. And there's so many great examples and so many stories out there. 913-408-7957. We'll talk to Kevin Keatsman to wrap up the show. He is taking over at 10 o'clock, of course, on KCMO Talk Radio. But right now, one of our topics of the morning has obviously been Doge, what's going on there, and the fact that even CNN had a poll done this week. And what does it show? Well, it shows that people are in favor of what Elon Musk and President Trump are trying to do with shrinking the size of government. Here's part of that yesterday.
This, to me, was one of the more shocking figures that I saw. Made me go, wait a minute, hold on one second. Whoa! Americans on Trump and Joe's efforts. Musk and Doge should influence government spending and operations. Look at this. 54%. The majority say that he and they should. How about approve of Trump trying to cut staff at government agencies? Again, you get a majority here. 51%. So, yeah, Elon Musk might not be that popular, but these cuts and the idea of spending cuts, at least within the federal government and cutting at government agencies, that actually has majority support. I was truly surprised by this, Kate, but the numbers are the numbers.
Genius. The numbers are the numbers. It's that kind of insight that you need CNN for. The numbers are the numbers, man.
Woo.
Yeah. I don't know where they come up with this stuff, but it's just
amazing grasp of the obvious.
It is truly, truly brilliant. Yes. So they're even shocked by this because they're obviously one of the many pursuing the narrative, and you're seeing it here in local Kansas City media as well, whether it's about the IRS workers, potential VA worker layoffs, covering Mark Alford town halls, Roger Marshall town halls in Oakley. The people are rising up. They're fed up with Doge. They're fed up with Elon. They're done with Trump. Everybody's regretting their votes. Well, the polling after the speech the other night was overwhelmingly positive. And now you have specific polling done about what Elon and Doge are attempting to do. And that's above 50%, despite the windfall of negative media attention in local news and national news. What's that tell you? And this conversation led to our caller of the day on KCMO.
It's the Mundo in the Morning Caller of the Day on KCMO Talk Radio, now on FM at 95.7.
Let's go to Riverside. Kirk is there. What's up, Kirk? You're on KCMO.
I think people kind of have to realize and look at it like, okay, look at your garage. You got a garage full of garbage. You've been collecting it for 30 years, 40 years, whatever. And you go, I'm going to clean out my garage. Do you go into your garage and take one thing out of your garage and go, yep, we're good, it's clean? Or do you go out and you clean the whole thing out, take it out in the yard, and start chunking stuff that you don't want and bring the stuff back in that you do want, or maybe you fix it and bring it back in? People have just lost their freaking mind on this.
They have,
Crazy.
Kirk. They have. And as someone who's getting nagged about the amount of crap in our garage right now, I can tell you right now that is a very good analogy. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. You guys have a great day.
You hit a sore spot there, buddy, but I do appreciate it. We've all been there. Kirk and Riverside, our caller of the day. John?
I got to clean out my garage and find my cooler. It's getting to be tornado season. So find the lawn chairs in the cooler to watch it in the garage.
Oh, now you're speaking my language. I even got Claire to do that once. She wanted to watch the hail one day, so we sat in the garage and watched the hail. Tornadoes, I might have to send her to the basement for that. But Either way, yeah, we're getting towards that time of year.
Well, if you can get a panoramic view one far away,
Yeah.
it's not so bad.
Yeah, that's a good
It's just
point.
kind of understanding what you're up against.
Yep, I got a lot. I got to get the city on. I just got to dump it on the curb and $20, they'll pick it up. But I mean, listen, it's been such awful weather the last few weeks. I'm struggling to get the garbage pail out there. I'm like putting on the jacket just to bring the garbage out to the curb. So we'll all get there. But I love Kurt's analogy. It's spot on. And then you hear from like Emmanuel Cleaver, Missouri congressman, of course, right here in Kansas City. He had this up yesterday on X, and it reads as follows. Talking about Doge, talking about, spending at the federal level. Here's the tweet or the X post from Cleaver. Trump, co-president Musk, and MAGA extremists are gutting the Social Security Administration. And even its own acting head is raising the alarm. Outsiders with no expertise are making devastating cuts that will lead to mistakes, hurting seniors, people with disabilities, and families who rely on the Social Security Administration every single day. And then he put a bow on that tweet with one of these.
You mustard moo.
Yeah, that's how he ended it. He should do that. Every Emmanuel Cleaver social media post must end with him saying, musty moo moo. That's got to be part of the deal now going forward. No other choice. But it's all fear mongering. Cutting the fat in the bureaucracy does not mean the checks are not going to clear. In fact, if we don't do something about the bureaucracy, the checks won't be clearing in a few years. We know that to be factually true based on where Social Security is trending. But the answer on their side is what? Well, just keep printing money. Just tax the billionaires. There's not enough billionaires to tax enough to pay for all this stuff, guys. There isn't. And deep down, you know that, but you don't care because you're riding the gravy train and printing money until the dollar is literally worthless.
And since when is having expertise in a particular topic a prerequisite in D.C., right?
Oh, that's very well done.
He said, thinking of AOC.
Yeah. Please. Like, what is Emmanuel Cleaver an expert at? Bueller?
Beef. Moo, moo, moo.
Yeah. What? He might give you some Bible verses from his old Reverend days?
Anything there on the text line about car wash? Or
Yeah. Oh, that's outstanding.
You still poor, broke, busted, and disgusted.
Ain't that the truth, man?
Amen or a woman.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Can I get an amen? Or can I get an a woman? What is he an expert at? Please, somebody tell me. There's got to be something good that's going to come in real time on the text line. I'm sure it'll come. 913-4087-957. It's unbelievable for anybody in D.C. who has been a lifelong bureaucrat to talk about someone having expertise. Elon Musk may be the smartest man of this generation. He arguably is. He's created billions and billions in dollars in net worth for people through his stocks, through his companies. He's created thousands and thousands of jobs. He may be the Einstein of the generation. And Emmanuel Cleaver, who when you hear him talk, has trouble stringing together 3 sentences, is questioning his expertise. You can't be serious. Kevin Keatsman will join us to wrap up the show. We'll have some fun with him before Uncanceled takes over at 10 o'clock on 95.7 FM and streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app.
Stream Mundo in the morning on the KCMO Talk Radio app.
Putting a bow on just a wild news week. I feel like every week the last few months have been like that. But also a crazy weather week. Blizzards a couple of nights ago. Waking up at 2 a.m. to wind and snow. But now we're pushing 60 today. But gosh, no one's had it better than Keatsman. Guy's just, he's loving life in Arizona, going to spring training, sending photos of the games to Mark and myself. I mean, he is just on fire right now. Good morning, my man. How are you?
It is pouring rain in the desert.
Oh, cry me a river. Cry me a river.
No, it is.
It is?
It never happens. It is soaking rain here. It's crazy.
Have you seen rain since you've been down there?
No. It rains like maybe 10 times a year in Phoenix, and so that's why they call it the Valley of the Sun, but it's real rain. Like, it's a soaker, man. And what's crazy is the desert is obviously beige. You know, it's all one color, right?
Mm-hmm.
Except when this happens, there's all kinds of cactus and flowering plants and stuff in the spring that up in the mountains where it's untouched, it turns beautiful, green, and the flowers are like red and stuff. It's crazy what happens when you get a rain here. It'll last a week or two, then it'll get dry, really dry and hot, and everything dies off and it turns brown again. But when this happens, they dance, man. They love it when it rains in the desert.
That's fantastic. So I know you've been at least to one Royals game, right? So what's the sense down there?
You know what? It's real optimism. I think it means nothing, really, that the Royals are going to be on national TV a lot this year, but it means something. Like in college, if you're on national TV, it's like, oh, we got exposure. People are going to see our program in our school, whatever. That's not Major League Baseball. But the Royals are on national TV through June 9 times. And that means they love Bobby Witt Jr. They know there's a superstar that people want to watch. And they believe in the pitching, and they believe the Royals are going to be in the race. I think the Royals are going to be an element this year. The division's really tight. Every team is good. Nobody's great. And that's perfect for what Kansas City baseball is. That means you have a chance to win your division. If you think about the NFL and parity and things like that, there's a little bit of that in the American League Central Division, and the Royals are part of it. I think we're in for the long haul. I think it's going to be a great season.
I'm looking forward to it, man. And I'll tell you what, I've had YouTube TV since I got to town, 7 years ago now. So I've never had the Royals on TV. So even getting whatever it is, 10 Sunday games now, I will put on the Royals. And baseball is great because sometimes it's just background noise. It's kind of the crack of the bat, the sound of summer. I'm looking forward to that. And then good baseball is just going to be the icing on the cake, hopefully.
Come on, Pete. Yeah, I know you're young and hip and cool. Get the cable package. Pay for it with your company. You have your own company. I know you do. It's a write-off. Get the package and watch it all. What are you talking about?
Well, I do
YouTube TV. Come on.
I do that for my Mets. I'm not sure I can do it for two teams, but maybe I'll have to because now you're properly shaming me into it. So I might have to pull the trigger now, which I do appreciate. Oh my gosh. Go ahead.
You get one service, you stream it all. It's amazing. So we got this place down here in Arizona, and we literally stream the app from the cable company in Kansas City. So it's double dipping. It's not bad.
That's
not
a
that
good point.
expensive.
That's a good point. I got to ask your opinion on this before we end the week. Yesterday, I'm down at T-Mobile for the Big 12 Women's Tournament. I was chaperoning a bunch of kindergartners, and it overall went pretty darn well. What are you laughing at? That's not even the good part of the story.
No, I just miss those days. I miss my daughter being a kindergartner.
Oh, I know. It does go fast. You're right.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there yesterday, and I'm like, you know what? These are the times that I'm going to think about in 25 years. Like this moment right here. And it's weird to think that way, but I try to do that because of what people like you and other friends who have older kids tell me. Like, that is going to be the good old days you think back to.
Things you dread, you cherish later in life. My daughter used to play soccer at 6 a.m. on Saturday mornings. I was like, what in the world am I doing? It was cold. It was like spring, like now. And you'd go out to these fields out at Heritage Park at 6:30 in the morning. The game was at 6:30. They would start at 6:30, and it would be 48 degrees, and you'd take a camp chair out there, and you'd go, and they would just kick the ball around, and they weren't any good. It was nothing. It was, for a sport, it was unwatchable. It was just kids playing. I'm like, she could play in the backyard at 6:30 in the morning, please. Why am I driving out to Heritage Park at 6:30 when it's 48 degrees? And I miss it so bad.
Wow. I literally try to think of comments like that all the time when I'm doing things like this. But I couldn't help but think yesterday, the Big 12 made a huge mistake moving the women's tournament up a week. I mean, it was a K-State game. They've got a pretty good women's team this year. There was nobody there outside of all these kids. Put it back in Municipal. Put it the same week of the men's tournament. Have fan bases bouncing back and forth. I actually think that would be better for the women's game. Grow the game. I know what they tried to do. Put them in better facilities, a nicer environment. But if not as many people are watching and consuming the product, what's it really worth, Kevin? I would go back to the way it was a couple of years ago. How would you do it?
Man, I don't know. I think I'd move it around for sure. I would put it in places where people would buy tickets. Caitlin Clark is basketball, women's basketball anyway.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain sports that I look at, and we love, you and I both love college football. Everybody loves the NFL. We like Major League Baseball, but only the Royals, not really Major League Baseball. When other teams are playing, we don't watch. So there's certain sports that are about the sport, and there's certain sports it's about the player or the athlete. Golf is that way. There's no Tiger Woods now. Golf is in a really bad place because there's no Tiger Woods. NBA is not great right now. Nobody likes LeBron. He's just unlikable. So the NBA is struggling. They don't have Michael Jordan. There's sports like that, and I think women's college basketball is like that. When Caitlin Clark was playing, everybody was watching, and now they're not. She's off. She's a pro, and it's helping the WNBA. It's just it's hard to create something that doesn't really exist. There's no giant momentum for women's college basketball or women's sports unless there's a giant star. And sports is just kind of like that. There's a few sports that we love, and then there's people or entertainers or athletes that we love. And I'm afraid college basketball for women doesn't have that right now.
So then, exactly, I agree, they don't. So it feels like you would get more fans just filtering over to Municipal from the men's tournament like you used to get than saying, let's try to get people down here for an event that the marketplace, frankly, doesn't want en masse. So I feel like you're better off trying to get leftovers from the men's tournament than trying to make the women's tournament the standalone event, because what I saw yesterday, it's not working.
No argument there, because fan bases come.
Yeah.
Like Iowa State fans, we know, notoriously come to Kansas City. So they come, and if the women are playing and the men are like 6 hours later, they're going to go to the game. At least a few of them, a fraction of them would go.
Mhm.
You're exactly right. It should definitely be tag teamed if they're going to do it in Kansas City. My question that I would ask is there a better place for the women's tournament? Is there a place where women's basketball rules, or some place that it really excites the fans to have that tournament? I don't know that exists anywhere in the Big 12, but it may. It's worth thinking about. I think a lot of this stuff should move around. I'm terrible. I'm a terrible Kansas Citian. I don't think the Big 12 basketball tournament should just have its home here. I think it should move around. There's a lot of places it should go. I think it would be good for the league. I don't think they look at it that way. I think they've got a home here. They know they're going to sell tickets because of KU fans. It's the KU Invitational every year, and it will be this year as well. And you know what? For the first time ever, KU needs this tournament.
Yeah.
They need the home crowd. They need to win some games. They need momentum to go to the tournament. And so the KU Invitational this year is an important deal for them. But normally it's just, hey, let's put it in Kansas City because the KU fans will buy tickets.
Yeah, I think it's good here, but if I could rotate it, I would look at Dallas, Phoenix, and Orlando, and Kansas City. That would be my rotation.
And Las Vegas, maybe? No?
They're west of every Big 12 school.
I'm in Phoenix. They're west of here. That's right. It's about 50 miles west of here. It's straight north. But no, I agree. I think if you create destinations, Orlando would be fun this time of year. Clearly, Texas is warmer. The KU fans are going to travel when they're good. I don't know. It maybe is a losing idea. I just think it. I'll tell you what rubs me wrong, Pete. It's always rubbed me wrong. It's in Missouri.
I do.
Missouri left.
Yes,
Missouri left. They're in the
yes.
SEC.
Mhm.
Why is the tournament in a state where there's no school?
Kevin,
You can have it in Tempe. Bring it out here in the desert. Let's go.
Arizona State right there. Hey, man, enjoy it. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great show.
Thank you, buddy.
Kevin Keatsman, Uncanceled, next on a Friday on KCMO Talk Radio.